attend this year. Fortunately, FAS filled this gap by setting up and conducting a number of micro conferences throughout the world, which allowed cooperators to set up meetings with the local attachés. We hope you took advantage of this opportunity. We fully expect that in July 2022, there will be an in-person USA EDC Attaché seminar held here in Washington. Over the next 2.5 hours, we will have a number of speakers and presentations, which I hope you will find of interest. Questions are welcome. In order to ask a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type in your question. Do not use the chat function, as this will not be monitored. Please note that the full bios of all the speakers and presenters were attached to the meeting invitation that you received. With that out of the way, we will get to the first presentation. Bobby Ritchie, who I am sure most of you know very well, is the current Minister Counselor for Agricultural Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. He will interview Secretary Thomas J. Vilsack on the agricultural priorities of USDA and the new administration. Since this is pre-recorded, there will not be the opportunity for questions. And with that, will you please start the video?
Hello, everybody. I'm Bobby Ritchie with the Foreign Agricultural Service in Beijing. It's a privilege to be able to join everyone virtually for the USA EDC summer meeting. Today, I have the honor of introducing Secretary Tom Vilsack, who was nominated by President Biden and confirmed as the 32nd Secretary of Agriculture on February 23rd, 2021. For those of you not aware, Secretary Vilsack was the longest serving member of President Obama's original cabinet. Prior to that appointment, he served 2 terms as the governor. Hello, everybody. I'm Bobby Ritchie with the Foreign Agricultural Service in Beijing. It's a privilege to be able to join everyone virtually for the USA EDC summer meeting. Today, I have the honor of introducing Secretary Tom Vilsack, who was nominated by President Biden and confirmed as the 32nd Secretary of Agriculture on February 23rd, 2021. For those of you not aware, Secretary Vilsack was the longest serving member of President Obama's original cabinet. Prior to that appointment, he served 2 terms as the governor of Iowa. He served in the Iowa State Senate and as the mayor of Mount Pleasant, Iowa. From 2017 until his return to USDA, he was president and CEO of the U.S. Dairy Export Council. Secretary Vilsack, it's great to see you today. And on behalf of the members of USA EDC and the USDA staff, welcome.
Bobby, it's great to be with all of you today. Really would like to be able to do this in person, but certainly appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone virtually through Zoom. Bobby, I want to thank you and the team in Beijing for incredible service that you all have provided, specifically during a pretty difficult situation, tough time with COVID and the trade situation. And I know that you all have done an amazing job, and we're now seeing the fruits of your work in significant sales under our Phase 1 trade agreement. So thanks for you and for the team in China. And thanks to USDA and the cooperators who are part of an incredibly important group. I don't think that I fully appreciated and realized the extent of trade and the importance of trade when I was secretary during the Obama administration. But after 4 years serving as president and CEO of the U.S. Dairy Export Council, I learned a lot in my experience with the Dairy Export Council. I learned that the trade does matter, not only to farmers in terms of the 20 to 30% of what we produce in this country being exported all across the world, not only to the nearly 1 million folks who are employed as a direct result of agricultural exports. And these are good paying, better paying jobs than many jobs in the economy, and are very much dependent on the work that's done by the cooperators and by our Foreign Ag Service in promoting U.S. agricultural products around the world. It's also important in terms of the ability to sell America, if you will, and the American brand of quality and safety and sustainably produced agricultural products. So it's a really important work that you all are about. And I first of all want to say thank you and acknowledge the significance of it. And the other lesson that I learned during my 4 years is how significant it is that we continue to deepen our presence in these markets. The importance of having people on the ground, constantly developing relationships and working with folks in country to sell America, to basically point out the benefits of buying from U.S. farmers and ranchers and producers and from U.S. food companies. The safety, the security, the stability, the sustainability, all of that, I think there are tremendous marketing opportunities here, but we need people to do that. The tremendous partnerships that you all help to create with universities and food companies and food service organizations and a variety of other folks who are engaged in helping promote U.S. products in these export markets. And you also obviously have been engaged and involved in a number of promotions, which are incredibly important as well. So by deepening our presence with your work, we continue to see significant exports. And this year, we're keeping our fingers crossed, but there's a very good chance that we will break the export record. It's a record that I'm sort of a double-edged sword, Bobby. On the one hand, I'm really happy that we're going to break the record when I'm a secretary, but on the other hand, I was secretary when the previous record was set, so I have to kind of temper my enthusiasm here. But in all seriousness, it couldn't come at a better time. Because of that increase in exports, because of the increased demand for U.S. products, we're now seeing commodity prices that are much, much better than they've been for a number of years. And that's going to make a big difference out on the farm. It's going to make a big difference in rural America. And it's going to continue to make a difference to all those people who are employed as a result of exports. So let me finish there by just simply saying thank you for the work you all do. I look forward to the questions that you have and hopefully can provide some insight as a result of the questions you're going to pose to me. So for that, I'll turn it back to you, Bobby.
Well, thank you, sir, for those comments. We all appreciate you taking a few moments to answer a few questions. One of the things that I've been watching here from Beijing is your engagement since you returned to the department. What's on the mind of rural America? And how do you feel that it relates to FAS and the cooperator work promoting U.S. food and ag exports?
You know, I think, Bobby, people are deeply concerned about the state of agriculture in the country from the standpoint of how difficult it is for many farms and ranches to be profitable. There's an interesting economic research service report that established that 89.6% of the farms in this country today do not generate the majority of income for the farm families and operators from the farming operation. And nearly 50% of our farms simply don't make a profit. So when you look at that, it is a clarion call for more new and better markets. And on the more market side, definitely exports. We talked about a record export year, but we all know how fragile this export market is when we are so reliant on China in terms of sales. Now, that's why I think it's going to continue to be important for us to engage and re-engage in conversations in Southeast Asia, where I think there are tremendous market opportunities, making sure that recent trade agreements with Mexico and Canada are in fact carried out as they were negotiated, but also looking for ways in which we can potentially extend our opportunities in Central America and South America, and certainly Africa over the long haul. When half the world's population increase is going to come from one continent in the next 15 years, it behooves us, I think, to see that our competitors in the EU are very aggressive in the African space because they see the growing trend and they see the growing demand that will occur. And as we see more stability in more of those countries in Africa, there's an opportunity there as well. So more new and better markets on the mind of folks, no question. And I would also say the resiliency of our food supply system. I think we all got shocked with the COVID. We never had faced a national disruption. We'd faced local disruptions with hurricanes and floods and things of that nature. But now we're seeing more nationally in scope. whether it's a pandemic or whether it's an ever-increasing drought that now impacts and affects nearly 90% of the Western U.S., we're seeing major disruptions or potential disruptions. So that's on the minds of a lot of folks as well. So the focus here for us is to continue to provide hope. And we provide hope by creating new market opportunities and expanded market opportunities in exports, by promoting local and regional food systems, and by doing a number of other things to improve income opportunities for farmers.
We talk a little bit about supply chain management. I know the department is engaged in the president's efforts to look at all of our critical supply chains. But you make a very good point. I don't think all of us, whether on the farm or in the cities, had ever faced some of those shortages that we saw back a year ago. What are your plans in the department to try and help address some of that?
Well, you know, the supply chain, it's a tricky issue because for many, many years, consumers were interested in a diversity of choice, and they were interested in going into the grocery store and not having to pay much for whatever it is they were purchasing. Just recently, we see roughly about 10% of American income, American family income is used for food. Well, I will tell you that people around the world is envious of that. But that efficiency and that consolidation has come with a price, and that price is we have a system that's not as resilient as it needs to be. So I think the challenge for us is to figure out ways in which we can make the supply chain more resilient. And I think a part of that is shortening the supply chain a bit domestically, so that we have more local and regional food systems supporting large-scale distribution systems. So we have a better balance there. So one processing facility goes down doesn't mean that the market is in chaos, as occurred during COVID on the hog side. That means also investing in additional processing capacity in the U.S., so that we're not as beholden to a small number of processing facilities in the country. So that's part of it. And again, looking for diversification, this is a theme I think we'll probably touch on virtually anything you ask me, is the need for us to continue to be aggressive on the trade side so that we're not overly dependent on one market, but we have greater resiliency. So if things don't get worked out, if some of the many things that could impact the China relationship with the U.S. Result in a situation where they make decisions, different trading decisions, that we're not as hampered as we were during the trade war last couple of years. That we have basically other opportunities and other avenues, and so part of what we need to really focus on is diversification. If we diversify that supply chain, we shorten the supply chain domestically. If we have more processing capacity, it creates more opportunities for farmers. It creates, I think, a stronger marketing opportunity while preserving the ability of Americans to have choice and hopefully preserving their ability to go out of the grocery store with more money in their pocket.
Absolutely. One of the things that I know you've done over the past 6 months is engage virtually with a lot of the other ag ministers around the world. You had the opportunity to talk to Minister Tong here in China now 2 months ago. What are some of the things that have come up in those discussions, and what are you taking home from them?
You know, I probably have talked to more ag ministers and secretaries in the first 6 months of this go around than I probably did in the first 2 or 3 years when I was secretary before. It goes back to my better understanding and deeper understanding of the importance of trade. And there is an overriding theme here, and that is that we're all concerned about the impact of climate and the changing climate and the challenges that a changing climate presents. And we're seeing it again in the U.S., deeper, longer droughts, more severe storms, more damage, uncertainty by virtue of that. And I think it really encourages the world community to really focus on this issue in an aggressive way and to realize that agriculture has a lot to contribute. You know, so often the discussion about climate change in agriculture is one that basically is faulting agriculture for methane or faulting agriculture for its greenhouse gas emissions. But agriculture is a place where there can be significant strides taken very quickly, really, to mitigate the consequences of a changing climate. I mean, there's carbon sequestration capacity virtually unlimited in the rural areas of the United States and in the farms of the United States. We could create new income opportunities for farmers. We can sequester carbon. We can lower the risk of rising temperatures by lowering greenhouse gas emissions. We can capture methane from livestock and convert it into a renewable energy and fuel source. We can do more with agricultural waste and create bio-based products. And in doing so, we can equip folks like yourself to be able to go out into those foreign markets and say, look, the United States has a sustainability story that is second to none. And the United States agriculture is committed to a zero emission agriculture future by the year 2050, significant reductions by 2030. And they're taking steps today to sequester carbon. They're taking steps today to embrace climate smart agricultural practices. They're taking steps today to reforest and to do better forest management. They're taking steps today to reduce the amount of methane from livestock and making it an opportunity instead of being a criticism, something that we can tout. So I would say the overarching point of conversation with all of these ag ministers is how do we collaborate? How do we share best practices? How do we work as a world community, agriculture community, to basically promote more sustainable practices, recognizing that there are multiple ways to do this, that there's no one true and blue way to do it. I think our friends in the EU seem to think their farm to fork program oftentimes I get the impression it's the only way to do this. It's not the only way. There are many other ways to do this: innovation, technology, gene editing, carbon capture and storage, conversion of agricultural waste, methane capture and reuse. A multitude of opportunities here, all of which can create more income for farmers, create a better and healthier climate, create jobs in rural places, and can provide us with a marketing advantage in export markets. So that's going to be a focus of ours over the course of the next 3.5 years, that's for sure.
And so Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Kerry has been reaching out around the world. How are those interagency discussions? Do the other parts of the U.S. government appreciate that message?
I think we do. Certainly appreciate Secretary Kerry's reaching out to me and to the Department of Agriculture, asking us to participate in the Agriculture Innovation Program with the UAE and other like-minded nations to expand research on the mitigation and adaptation side of the equation, especially as it relates to water. This is an issue, obviously, that the folks in the Middle East are deeply concerned about. But, frankly, the folks in the western part of the United States are really concerned about it today. We're seeing lake levels that we haven't ever seen or haven't seen for quite some time that threaten not only the water supply, but also the power supply in the western U.S. So this is a real serious issue. And the ability of the world community to come together to collaborate, as Secretary Kerry and President Biden have encouraged and urged, is certainly a positive development. And I think we're seeing a lot of ministers that I talk to expressing interest in joining that effort. And hopefully at the COP26 meeting in Scotland coming up in November, that we'll be in a position to showcase the world agricultural commitment to climate smart practices and to research and innovation.
I know you're a busy man. I don't want to take too much of your time. Just one more question. You spent four years with our friends at the U.S. Dairy Export Council. We have them and others in the cooperator community with us today. What is your one message to that group as we move forward with a complicated landscape of issues, whether it's drought at home or changing food safety regulations around the world or challenges and efforts to diversify? What is the one message to our audience today?
Well, I'm going to probably try to squeeze a couple messages into a single message, if that's okay. First and foremost, I think there's the ability to continue to be proud of the United States brand, and to basically be able to promote that brand as a brand that is not only about ample supply and safety as it has been in the past, but that we do have a sustainability story that is second to none, and we should proudly display that and market it around the world. So that would be part of the message. The other message that's part of this is there's great strength in diversity, and whether at home, whether it's diversity of size of operations or methods of production or the farmers themselves, the more diverse we can make agriculture, the stronger it will be. And that's also true. The more diversity we have in the market capacity, market opportunities that we have, the better and stronger our exports efforts are going to be. Again, not being over-reliant on a single market for a disproportionate amount of our exports, but looking for creative ways to get into Southeast Asia, creative ways to begin really thinking about Africa and what might make sense. And to continue to put pressure on us in the U.S. government to look for trade agreements and to look for reductions in tariffs and to continue to beat the sanitary and phytosanitary drum to make sure that barriers are removed, but also encouraging the opportunity and helping us to identify where the opportunities might be best and easiest, if you will, so that we can really work collaboratively together to diversify the market opportunities. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to be proud of and a lot to market and a lot to sell. And we need each other. We need the cooperators. We need a terrifically talented Forward Agriculture Service, and recognizing that everyone has been stressed during a very difficult time, that the numbers at the USDA were down quite a bit. Some people are doing 2 or 3 jobs. We're trying to address that in as quickly as we can in an appropriate way. But we're going to try to build back the muscle of the agency. But we definitely need that cooperative spirit and the cooperators working to magnify and amplify our message.
You're absolutely right. In my 35 years, big part of it was spent in the EU. The hallmark of the U.S. food supply is that it's safe, it's nutritious, it's affordable, and you can depend on it. And something I think we always have to keep in mind and lead with that very positive message. Well, Secretary Vilsack, on behalf of...
Let me say this, by 35 years, if you've been in this business for 35 years, you must have started when you were like 6.
Well, it was good training at Iowa State University.
Well, there you go.
Well, Secretary Vilsack, thank you on behalf of the USA EDC members that are joining us today. I know they appreciated your thoughts and your insight. And, my parents farm cotton about 200 miles east of you today. So thank you for all you do on behalf of the U.S. farmers and ranchers and the hard work they put in the field every day.
Well, it's a privilege and honor to be with you folks today, and a privilege and honor to work for our farmers, ranchers, and producers. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Well, that was very good. And we certainly appreciate Secretary Vilsack and Bobby Ritchie taking the time out of their busy schedules to address us here. Our next 2 speakers will give trade policy updates. We will have questions after each speaker. Jason Heffemeister will start. He is the Acting Deputy Undersecretary for Trade and Agricultural Affairs at USDA. He has been involved in agriculture for farm and trade policy for almost 30 years, including almost 24 at USDA and with the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Jason, the stage is yours.
All right, great. Thanks, Chuck. I'm going to try and share my screen here. And what I'll do is go through a few sort of conceptual points. I mean, you just heard from the Secretary, who gave as clear of an articulation as we can about how USDA is looking at trade and the really positive vision he has. You'll hear from Julie in just a few minutes about the USTR process and what she can say about where we're at in terms of negotiations. So what I want to do is talk just a little bit about conceptually about trade policy, and I think how inside Washington, inside the government, we are thinking about trade policy, just so people, regular civilians, can be aware, but also to make sure you guys are able to participate as best you can. So I think you can see some lettuce there being watered. I'm going to show you some slides. Some of you will have seen these before, so I'm going to go through them quickly. Here we got a great story on U.S. ag exports. We're looking at a record in fiscal year 21. Powered by export exports, particularly to China, has been a great story. Other Asian markets, Uzbek markets, were up in volume and up in value. We in agriculture, if we don't export, the product sits here at home, it weighs down on prices, that hurts farm profitability, there's less ag production, less rural jobs. If we produce it in the United States, we can export it because we're competitive. Even the stuff we import, we also export a lot of the same products based on product differentiation, seasonality, and other things. So we are competitive producers, export dependent. We are optimistic about our future. We see more customers overseas. This data is pre-pandemic, but I'm optimistic we will get back on this trend where people leaving poor and vulnerable status, joining the middle class, and some even becoming rich. Those people eat more. We should be serving them. We are seeing more imports into the United States. The one that gets the most policy attention is on the horticultural side, the green part of this bar. And so this is where there's particular competition stress in certain parts of our industry. So we are aware of that. And trade agreements, of course, deliver for agriculture. When we do a trade agreement, we open markets, we sell more, ipso facto. Okay, so the thing that I'm going to jump to here is a couple lessons. One is, here's our top 6 markets. This is 60% of our exports, right? We saw with China and the trade war, when we lost a market, we felt it, right? It triggered the $28 billion in mitigation payments. So whatever we do, we've got to keep an eye on these big markets, right? How do we keep these markets open and growing? The flip side of that coin is we've got a lot of money to be made in the rest of the world. The other 40%, these are billion-dollar markets right here. What do we do to keep those markets open? What sort of system do we create that makes it predictable, transparent, and consistent? The ability to access customers so we don't have to do trade wars with every last Morocco, New Zealand, and Ecuador of the world to keep our sales going. So that's an important principle for us. All right, so this is what I really want to focus on, and I'll be quick. So conceptually, when we talk about trade policy, coming out of World War II, the US government had a clear and unified vision. We wanted to integrate the globe, right? We were fighting the Soviet Union. We were going to win the Cold War. We wanted to rebuild after World War II. We learned the mistakes of Smoot-Hawley and the Depression. So we had a very strong process of global economic integration, including through trade, including through reducing trade barriers at home and overseas. And in the net, it was a wildly successful strategy. You can see the number of people living in poverty is the red area here. You can see how that curve was bent in the post-war era. And then you see the people living above poverty line, the blue area, just exponentially grew, right? And so this is a story of better human existence. It's driven by innovation, it's driven by trade, it's driven by technology, and all of those have us not completely explained by. An important contribution to that was open markets and expanded economic integration. And we in agriculture, we were the beneficiaries, right? We're that green line. These are US ag exports as we were able to feed these new customers. So the point I'm making here is that we had a coherent strategy. We were for integration. We were for lowering barriers. We were for trade agreements. We were for giving consumers more choices and exporters more opportunities. But this model started to run out of speed in the 2000s. Even as we were in the Bush administration, we lifted heaven and earth to get the CAFTA agreement through. The Oman trade agreement was a huge congressional effort. Panama held up for years. Just a reflection of how difficult trade politics had become. And this old model, people were doubting whether or not it was working for them. The world was more competitive. The Soviet Union was no longer there as an organizing principle. Other countries were competing, and some competing unfairly. And so the strategy of open markets integration really was running out of political steam in the United States. This really came to a head in the 2016 election, right? When particularly candidate and President Trump said, "You've been a sucker on trade. The United States has been losing on trade." And he pointed particularly to trade deficits as an indicator of failure. So this chart here shows the US trade deficit in goods. You can see we bump along at about $800 billion a year in deficit. I have to point out from my economist roots, look at the share of that deficit that was oil and gas, right? At its peak, it was half or more of our trade deficit because we're a big petroleum consuming country, right? We are consumers generally. We got a big country. We use a lot of petroleum. Then we have the fracking revolution, right? In the 2010s, US starts producing more and more oil and gas. We import less and less, but our overall deficit doesn't change. You know, instead of importing oil and gas, we started importing Sony Walkmans, right? Transistor radios, things like that. So this is a point here, first of all, that the goal of reducing trade deficit, we didn't make any progress on that in the last 4 years, but also that it was the wrong goal, right? This is a macroeconomic phenomenon. The United States, we are consumers, we are not savers. Our economy is awesome. People come and invest here. We are awash in foreign currency. What do we do with it? We buy stuff, all right? But the point I'm making here is that what President Trump was doing was trying to articulate a different vision. You know, trade wars are good and easy to win, he said. He was a tariff man, right? The rest of the world was unfair. He would reduce trade with the rest of the world. So, you know, I don't think that was a successful strategy. It didn't we didn't get great results from it. But it raises the question, well, then now what? If the old vision of free trade, rising tide, lifting all boats, the more trade you do, the better we'll all be. If that has run into real serious opposition, if a sort of protectionist vision of trade really didn't get off the ground, now what is the vision of trade? And that's what there's a lot of talk inside Washington about. How do we articulate a new trade policy for the middle class, a trade policy that works for the working man, that reflects our human rights principles, that is good for the environment, a trade policy that reflects our values. You know, these are the kinds of things that people are looking to identify right now. I think agriculture's got a real strong case to be made that export-focused sector like ours can deliver economically, can deliver environmentally, and can deliver globally for the world. But I think what we have to think about is there's a conversation going on that's talking about, we're not so impressed by your big numbers anymore. We're asking you more about the distribution of the benefits of gain, right? So yes, you've increased your ag exports, but who has benefited in the United States? Are you doing it sustainably? You know, these are the kind of questions that are being asked more and more in Washington. And so we're in that conversation. You know, the Secretary, I think, was pretty clear about his view on these. You know, we have a long tradition here in USDA about promoting exports and rules-based market-oriented trade. So that's part of the conversation that we're moving into. So why don't I stop here? And instead of taking questions, I suggest we just roll right into Julie's presentation if she's ready.
Sure, let me introduce Julie then. Hello, Julie. Julie Callahan serves as the Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Agricultural Affairs and Commodity Policy. In this role, she oversees work to promote the interests of U.S. farmers, ranchers, and food manufacturers, including oversight of agricultural trade policy development and work to reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers to U.S. agricultural exports. Welcome, Julie, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just have to say, I think Jason is delaying the question so that he can...
We're having a hard time hearing you, Julie.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Not very well.
Let me check my volume. Is that better if I turn up the volume a little?
No, I don't. I think it's still very, it's just in the background noise almost. I mean, your voice is in the background.
Julie, you might want to try putting your mouthpiece closer. Maybe that will help. Your the earphone piece.
Right. It's right.
It's,
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better when you move it closer.
Okay. I'm trying to look at my sound troubleshooting. Let me see. Well,
I think we'll all be quiet and try to listen.
Is that okay? If I hold it like this, is that better?
Julie, why don't you shout like you do at me on the phone when I make a mistake?
Okay, let me try one more thing. Okay, well, my volume is up. Is that helping with the sound at all?
It helps a little bit, so I think we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, it helps a lot.
Okay, I will try to speak very loudly. First, I'm very happy to be able to talk with you today to provide a trade policy update from the USTR perspective. And first, I'll just provide a quick update on USTR leadership, which I find myself repeating over and over during presentations. Since the Senate unanimously confirmed Ambassador Tai, the president has nominated the 2 deputy USTRs who are awaiting Senate confirmation. And in the meantime, we're all eagerly awaiting the announcement of the nominee for chief ag negotiator. Unfortunately, I don't have any updates for you today. COVID has really disrupted our lives and also has really interfered with the DC rumor mill. So I don't even have rumors to provide for you today. But of course, speaking for the career staff at USTR, we're very much looking forward to having our full leadership on board. And in the meantime, the ambassador is evaluating the specific issues in trade relationships, priorities, and aligning trade policy objectives with the broader Biden-Harris administration priorities. So with that, I'd like to provide an update on the broad goals and priorities, while noting that I don't really have information for you regarding some of the administration's priorities, in particular, whether we'll be launching new comprehensive trade negotiations with particular countries, what we'll be doing in different regions, whether we'll be taking specific disputes, either bilaterally or in the WTO, or also any answers regarding 232 and 301 tariffs. Those types of issues the ambassador is still considering. But what I would like to cover today are some of the high-level trade policy goals under the Biden administration. And I'd like to start also by providing a quick overview of the USTR Agriculture Office and our staffing, and how we work with USDA and others in tackling trade issues. So, this idea came to me a few days ago when a stakeholder on a phone call mentioned, well, we know when USTR gets involved, things are really bad. And, I didn't quite know how to take that, but they weren't completely wrong about that. The primary role of USTR is to develop trade policy, negotiate with foreign governments, and execute our trade strategy, which we do in coordination across executive branch agencies. We also provide feedback to agencies on domestic rules and to ensure consistency with US trade obligations. In terms of our office itself, we are very small. I currently have 10 staff members who are assigned to both regional portfolios as well as cross-cutting issue areas. And we also cover international organizations. So we have a very small number of people covering a very wide portfolio range of issues and topics. And for that reason, we rely heavily on our interagency colleagues, whether it's the food safety, plant health, and animal health regulators, Customs and Border Protection, the development agencies, EPA, and in particular with the USDA Foreign Ag Service, who has the boots on the ground around the world, provides us the information. And our preference really is that issues can be resolved best at the technical level with the agencies, with the expertise. And it really is, USTR comes in usually when issues are not able to be resolved on those levels. So as I mentioned, we work extensively across the executive branch. We also work with Congress, with our cleared advisors, and with other stakeholders, really to ensure that we have a well-informed, comprehensive trade strategy that takes into consideration all of the relevant input, all of the relevant equities. And in this respect, the United States really serves as a role model for other countries to follow in terms of how we develop these comprehensive policies. So the policy objectives, of course, we tackle both tariff issues and non-tariff barriers, both equally important, but they require different strategies and different types of engagement. In tackling the non-tariff barriers, countries have multiple ways of dreaming up new varieties of non-tariff barriers. So we do have to be flexible in how we approach them. And like I said, our preference really is to resolve the issues at the most basic level possible, where technical experts get together with their technical counterparts. That's really best. When USTR gets involved is when the regulator to regulator discussions may break down, they may not be getting anywhere, and those technical levels are not sufficient to resolve the concerns. Or in cases where there may be systemic cross-cutting challenges that involve multiple regulatory agencies, and USTR may step in to try to coordinate and get some progress where a number of experts need to be engaged simultaneously. There's also certain types of agreements that we can enter into, either, specific agreements like trade and investment framework agreements, where they lay the foundation for a deeper bilateral partnership, or it could be a comprehensive negotiation where in those negotiations, we may be able to address existing non-tariff barrier issues that are of concern, but also prevent future unjustified non-tariff barriers by agreeing to certain core principles, good regulatory practice in the SPS chapter, in the technical barriers to trade chapter, to really lay the foundation to prevent trade barriers in the future. And of course, we also engage in multilateral settings. USTR has the lead in the World Trade Organization, of course, but we also engage with the US interagency on US positions, whether it's in Codex Alimentarius, other types of international organizations where other agencies have the lead, but USTR engages and contributes to the US policy position. So that's sort of the staff level, day to day, regardless of administration, these things are happening. In terms of the Biden administration trade agenda, you've probably already seen the 2021 President's Trade Policy Agenda, which was published earlier this year, that reconfirms that opening markets and reducing trade barriers are fundamental to any trade agenda. That, of course, remains the case. Eliminating unjustified barriers, that's really the bread and butter of what USTR always does to ensure that US producers are able to compete on a level playing field. Now, the Biden administration has messaging, which I'm sure you've all heard, which is Build Back Better. This Build Back Better approach includes prioritizing our domestic economic recovery from the pandemic, building international alliances, supporting workers, and protecting the environment. And ag sustainability is really a key policy focus under this Build Back Better umbrella, as is ensuring that the US trade policy benefits American workers, small business, rural America, and a diverse spectrum of stakeholders. From what we're working on currently in the sustainability realm, we certainly recognize that sustainability and environmental standards are important, and US producers are already investing significantly in innovative practices to improve sustainability, improve soil health, use fewer inputs, increase yield. And with the growing interest internationally in food systems, our engagement in this space will reflect our domestic context and capitalize on the good work that's already taken place across US agriculture. This is something that the Secretary was just emphasizing, and it's certainly one of our priorities to really promote what's happening in US ag today and how that contributes to our sustainability goals. So gathering additional data regarding how modern agricultural production contributes to sustainability goals and the US commitment to meeting these goals will remain important to our climate and sustainability discussions moving forward, especially in this multilateral space. And relatedly, I received lots of questions from stakeholders on EU Farm to Fork. We're certainly tracking this progress. The EU hasn't really fleshed out its policies beyond high-level goals. We're getting sort of bits and pieces of what they're planning. And I certainly understand there's some concern among US stakeholders of what this is going to mean for US market access into the EU, where we already have significant challenges. So really taking a science and evidence-based approach is going to continue to be critical, both critical for meeting our sustainability goals and ensuring that other countries have justification for any measures that they put in place, that the measures are based on science, that they're based on risk, and that they're not just putting measures in place for disguised non-tariff barrier purposes. So our intention is that the US ag system, as I mentioned, can serve as a model for countries to aspire to as they pursue their own environmental goals and protection by advocating modern agricultural tools and technologies and practices to increase efficiency. The other big area that I'm sure you've heard from both hearing Ambassador Ty's speeches and other administration officials talking about worker-centered trade policy. This, I know there's a lot of questions. What does that mean for agriculture? The priority being translated into the agricultural space, the ambassador has made it clear that she's focusing on avoiding pitting one sector of the economy against another. You know, it isn't steel against agriculture. Her intention is to create a trade policy that leads to improvements in the day-to-day lives of Americans, whether they're working in small, medium, or large enterprises across sectors, and that includes food and agricultural production, manufacturing, distribution, and trade. And as she's mentioned in several speeches and in a number of stakeholder meetings, her goal is to have workers at the table and farmers at the table as these policies are developed. Another area that we're focusing on currently is WTO reform and the work taking place in the lead up to the ministerial conference later this year, as we call it MC12. To probably state the obvious, it's important that we maintain realistic expectations for MC12, particularly in the ag space. And, you know, with respect to agriculture, we're really considering carefully where we see WTO members moving toward convergence in any way, and where they either remain locked in their own national positions or maybe actually diverging, and sort of avoid those areas. We're trying to identify what makes sense for actual deliverables at the end of this year for MC12. Where we see things going at this point is a realistic goal is in transparency provisions. These, I don't see this as a consolation prize. It's actually a very important deliverable that we're seeking because it contributes to a fundamental understanding of the current situation. And without that, we won't be able to move forward with actual negotiations. So we are seeking these transparency deliverables, trying to get additional support from WTO members and see where we can go. So kind of summing up where we are at USTR, as we do wait for our additional leadership to come in, we'll continue to advance a proactive strategy to eliminate unjustified non-tariff barriers, certainly committed to enforcing our trade laws and taking prompt action in response to unfair trade practices. We'll also continue working with USG regulators to ensure that we're meeting our own commitments for our international obligations, and also continue to engage constructively on sustainable food systems and the environmental discussions that are happening in the multilateral space. Part of this, of course, will be promoting access to tools and technologies in support of farmer livelihoods, and we'll continue our coalition building efforts to support all of these moving forward. So really, for all of this, stakeholder feedback continues to be essential for us. As I mentioned, we're a very small staff here in DC, and really appreciate when stakeholders reach out to us, let us know what's happening on the ground with trading partners. We rely on all of USDA's foreign offices to do the same. And I would certainly welcome all of you to contact me and my staff as issues come up around the world as well. So I'm going to kind of leave it at that and open to questions. And I hope you heard most of what I said.
Thank you, Julie. We do have one question here. It was addressed to Jason, but I really think it's something that is appropriate for both of you to answer. It says, Jason, I understand that the new order trade policy will be expecting more from those benefiting from their exports, that is climate support, fair labor practice, etc. But how will U.S. competitiveness be maintained? Do you see this as a concern?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and Julie should pipe in here too. I mean, first of all, I think it's still up in the air what exactly is going to be expected from whom and how. But certainly you're not going to go in the wrong direction if you work on improving your sustainability, improving the fairness of your practices, and explaining that to other people, right? It's good for lots of reasons. To what extent is our competitiveness based on unsustainable practices? To what extent is our competitiveness based on unfair wages? I don't think fundamentally that's the case. I think when you look at the natural advantages of U.S. agriculture, we and anything close to a level playing field, we're going to compete just fine. So maybe the responsibility is on us, on the government, as we start expecting better performance from U.S. and foreign producers to make sure that we are doing it in a fair manner. So that's my reflection. Julie?
Yep, I would agree. In this sustainability and climate space, what I'm primarily focused on is translating our approach to SPS to this sustainability and environment space, because, as we all know, food safety, plant health, and animal health are all really important. That doesn't mean countries should put in place measures that aren't based on science, that don't have a risk assessment to support them, and just say, well, it's for food safety, and leave it at that. And I think in the sustainability and climate space, we need the same amount of rigor to the measures that are put in place, and also have a way to quantify and demonstrate how the United States actually really is a leader in this space, so that we aren't faced with unjustified barriers moving forward. And really, it's like Jason said, the government does have an important role in this space to make sure the criteria that ultimately may be adopted in these multilateral forums reflect what the United States is doing, and that we aren't left with some sort of rubric that doesn't fit with the US system. So that's another area that I'll be watching closely.
Thank you, Julie. We have one more question here, and it is, how is USTR and FAS reacting to the ITC's recent report to Congress that concludes that trade agreements over the last 4 decades have had only a small positive effect?
I'm not sure what you mean by reacting, but the ITC report, we just had a briefing from the ITC, really useful information that comes from those reports. I think part of it is important to put into context what we mean by small impact. The US economy is very, very large. So if you're looking at a percent of GDP, it might look small, but that really isn't small to the exporter that actually can now compete on a level playing field. And also, I think we have to take into consideration a number of our competitor partners. There's a number of countries that compete with us globally in the ag export space. And if our competitors are entering into new comprehensive agreements with our export markets and they get preferential tariff access, that's going to leave us behind. So there's a number of ways of looking at the benefits of agreements. Part of it is certainly we want to open new market access. At the same time, we don't want to lose our competitiveness if other countries are entering into agreements and offering each other preferential tariff treatment and leaving us out. So, you know, I look at the ITC report as really informative. It also breaks down the impact on different types of groups, you know, who's benefiting and who isn't. And that's good food for thought to try to make sure. Jason mentioned there's a lot of emphasis on equity and who's benefiting from our trade policies. But at the same time, I don't want to overreact and say, oh, all of this is not significant enough and we're spending too much time on it. I'm still a very big proponent and advocate of entering into these types of agreements. Because there's certainly benefit for a lot of sectors.
Jason, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, let me unmute myself first. So I benefit from not having read the report, so I have a lot of opinions about it, but I'll just share two. One is when I look at my sector, agriculture, and I try and imagine what we would look like without trade, you know, we would look very, very different. And so, you know, we're not the whole economy, we're not the whole planet, but, you know, if half of our wheat is not being exported, we are having a lot less wheat farmers in this country, and so on. So that's an important reality to measure against the assumptions of the authors. The second is when you look at the free flow of capital, ideas, and goods in the post-World War II era. To me, that is the fundamental difference between pre-war and post-war the global economic organization. And certainly we would have had some of the technology gains, we would have had some of the economic gains if there was no trade, if each country was operating by itself. But I cannot imagine how you would have fostered the kind of investment and the kind of which generates the kind of innovation which has made the 20th century, you know, the most amazing century on the planet. So, you know, economists, you know, they've got to model, they've got to make assumptions, they've got to simplify things. You know, it's great. Econometrics is a cool thing. You know, let's try and unpin as best we can. But I have those two really core observations.
We got one final question for this session as we're running out of time. Secretary Vilsack identified Southeast Asia in the short term and Africa in the long term as good opportunities for diversifying ag exports. Can Jason point to any specific strategies being considered for targeting those regions in terms of both trade policy initiatives other than the Kenya FTA and/or market development programs?
You know, I can't really. You know, we are in a position right now of top to bottom, bottom to top, side to side reviews. We are assessing our policy posture going forward. You know, we're not on vacation, right? We are continuing to engage these countries bilaterally to get rid of particular barriers that are of concern to us. You know, good news out of Vietnam just 2 weeks ago in terms of some new biotech approvals. You know, that kind of thing goes on. But the big strategy, I think you're going to have to wait. Julie, do you agree?
I agree. And we certainly are hearing from stakeholders of their interest in Southeast Asia in opening new market access. It's certainly a keen area of interest. And we're taking that very seriously, and the ambassador is as well.
Well, thank you very much, Jason and Julie, for those insightful comments. We appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedules to come talk to this group. And with that, we'll head on to the next panel. which will be about climate resilient agriculture and the role of sustainability. Before I introduce Steve, I just want to stress to people that you should use the Q&A function as opposed to the chat function. So Steve Softman is president of the Leather and Hide Council of America. In this role, Stephen represents and promotes the interests of the U.S. hides, skins, and leather industry before a wide range of stakeholders, including U.S. and foreign governments, industry associations, media outlets, and other organizations related to global leather production and trade. Steve, I will turn it over to you to introduce your panel. Thank you.
All right, Chuck, thanks very much. And just checking, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
All right, first step's done, great. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, everybody, for having us today and for allowing me to chair this panel. I think it's going to be an extremely interesting one, an issue that's very top of mind for all of us, I think, on this webinar, which is climate resilient agriculture and the role of sustainability. And I would add to that also the role of sustainability in our marketing efforts as cooperators. So I'm going to introduce each of our speakers in turn. We will have each of them give a small presentation, and then we will wait till the end, and then we will have Q&A with each of the speakers as a whole. So please, as you're listening to their presentations, feel free to use the Q&A button, and we'll be monitoring that for Q&A at the end. So before I introduce our first speaker, I thought I would just open up the panel with a quick anecdote from my corner of the U.S. agricultural world with the leather and hide industry and something we're facing as it relates to marketing and sustainability. So in 2015, for many of you who probably don't know this, in 2015, a U.S. cattle hide used for leather production purposes cost between about $80 to $90 per piece. Our export values annually around that time were about $2.5 to $3 billion in value. If you fast forward to 2020, that same cattle hide was selling between only $15 and $20 per piece, and our export values have dropped below $1 billion annually for the first time in decades. So what's happened over that 5-year period? Well, we didn't experience any major shocks to our supply. We didn't experience any major droughts. We didn't lose a major market. Even the tariffs were relatively harmless to our industry. What we saw was our primary competitors in the material space, which is typically plastic synthetic materials, started marketing themselves in a completely different way. They started marketing themselves by calling themselves vegan leather, green leather, eco leather. Many of you all have probably seen this in one way or another. So they really tried to start marketing themselves as a more sustainable alternative to real leather to consumers. And frankly, it was a successful strategy. We lost, unfortunately, in the real leather space, we lost a lot of market share in fashion and footwear and auto, a lot of our traditional outlets for leather. So in response to that, as cooperators and as an industry, we have had to go back and completely rethink how we approach ourselves, our industry, and how we market our product. And we had to learn really two big things to do that. One, we had to learn what makes our supply chain within the U.S. Sustainable and how we can improve on that as well. And two, and almost more importantly, once we knew what makes us sustainable and what we're doing to be good stewards of the land, we had to learn how to market it. We had to learn how to market that product as the sustainable alternative to some of the synthetics that we're competing against. So I am sure nearly every group on this webinar has experienced some form of this or is experiencing this now and thinking about these questions and how they can be addressed. So we pulled together this panel to kind of start that conversation and help you all along in thinking about this and what makes us sustainable, what we could be doing better, and most importantly, how we can be marketing that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn to our panelists, and I will introduce them in turn as they come up. So first, I'm going to introduce Mindy Selman, and Mindy is the Senior Environmental Markets Analyst with USDA's Office of Energy and Environmental Policy, and Mindy's also going to be joined here by Dr. Stephanie Morris, who is the Agricultural Project Coordinator in the same USDA Office of Energy and Environmental Policy. So they will be discussing USDA's current climate plan. So Stephanie, I believe we're going to turn it over to you to hopefully share your screen seamlessly.
I'll be going first. Let me try to share my screen.
Mindy will be going first. Great, even better.
All right, let me try to put it in presenter. There. All right, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. Thanks for the introduction, Steve. Myself and my colleague Stephanie Morris will be sharing this presentation. We'll be talking about USDA climate plans in response to the executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, which was issued in late January 2021 this year. It directs the federal agencies to coordinate to do a government-wide response to the climate crisis. And in particular, this executive order tasks USDA with delivering a report with recommendations for developing a climate smart ag and forestry strategy within, we had to prepare that within 90 days. And it also tasked all federal agencies with all federal departments with including USDA to prepare action plans for climate adaptation and resilience. So our office is the Office of Energy and Environmental Policy, which sits in the Office of the Chief Economist. We're not within any of the mission areas, but we do coordinate policies of climate change, environmental markets, and energy policy across the department. So this sort of landed in our laps. And between February and May, our office coordinated the elements of the executive order, including soliciting input through listening sessions and public comments, and also taking up the department regulation on climate adaptation and doing revisions to that. We did release the 90-day report as required by the executive order in May. It outlines a climate smart ag and forestry, or it outlines recommendations for a climate smart ag and forestry strategy, and you can see that report online. The second report on adaptation and resilience, which Stephanie is leading, is currently submitted to the White House, but not final yet. So just to give a little bit of context, U.S. agriculture is about 10.5% of U.S. emissions. That doesn't include forestry, which is a sink. But agriculture does have the ability to sequester carbon in our soils, as we know, and also reduce emissions from other sources of like manure management, rice cultivation, fertilizer usage. So this policy, this strategy addresses how we can start reducing that wedge. So to jump into it, the Climate Smart Ag and Forestry Strategy was designed to promote voluntary adoption of practices that can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also provide resilience to the sector. It's a multi-pronged approach, just like Secretary Vilsack was mentioning. We need to have a lot of a broad array of approaches. Is not going to be a silver bullet. So it's a multi-pronged approach. It's meant to be place-based, flexible, locally led. And of course, this initial report was generated within 90 days. It has recommendations, and we will be fleshing that out as an agency in the coming months. But I just wanted to go through what the elements of the strategy are, or the recommended elements of the strategy. The first one is to prepare USDA to quantify, track, and report the benefits of climate smart ag and forestry activities. Internally, we kind of call this the readiness piece, where we need to be ready to implement climate smart ag forestry strategies. We need to have the foundational elements within the agency to be able to quantify the benefits we're getting from these practices, have the tools to do that, be able to track implementation and quantify them at the program level, but also at the national level. And then second, develop a CSAF strategy that works for all farmers, ranchers and forest owners. So this, we realize that we need to do a better job at USDA including socially disadvantaged communities and tribes in our programs. And this speaks to that, as well as advancing principles of environmental justice, and also just removing barriers to adoption of CSAF practices that might be in our programs. Number 3, leveraging existing, and by the way, we just have a big thunderstorm that just is rolling through, so hopefully I don't get cut off, but if I do, Stephanie's gonna have to take over. So anyway, number 3, leveraging existing programs. So of course, through our existing programs, we already promote a lot of climate smart ag and forestry strategies. So this element is really about using the tools that we already have in, through our programs to prioritize climate risks and adaptation opportunities, as well as practices that have carbon benefits. It also includes things like investing in infrastructure that can help facilitate CSAF practice adoption. So maybe broadband is a tool that can help, you know, adoption of green seeker technologies, and also can help with education and outreach. Also pipelines, et cetera, for biogas projects. So there's a lot of elements to that as well. 4, strengthen education, training, and technical assistance. We heard loud and clear through our stakeholder sessions that technical assistance is a big priority. So strengthening that technical assistance and building on education and outreach that we are currently doing will be critical to increasing the literacy around this issue and assisting our farmers and ranchers in adopting some of these practices. We anticipate that the USDA climate hubs are going to play a big role here, and Stephanie is going to talk a little bit more about the climate hubs, so I won't go into that. 5 is support new and better markets for agriculture and forestry products generated through CSAF practices. This is something I also heard Secretary Vilsack hit on, but we anticipate there is going to be an increasing demand for commodities produced with CSAF practices. So under this element, we see supporting and facilitating these markets, not just voluntary carbon markets, but also markets for renewable energy and biogas and ethanol, wood products, sustainable wood products, and also just sustainable and commodities produced with CSAF practices. So where am I? On number 6, that is develop a forest and wildfire resilience strategy. That was specifically called out in the executive order that this strategy needed to include a way to tackle forest and wildfire resilience. So under this piece of the strategy, we're looking at fuels reduction, reforestation, and applied research. And then lastly, we have improving research and innovation, increasing our understanding of climate change, its effects on agriculture and forests, but also really digging into those technologies that have the potential to mitigate emissions from agriculture, and also looking at a human element, human and economic dimensions of climate change through some of our programs like ERS. Just briefly, before I turn it over to Stephanie, this is the sort of a list of practices that are included in the Climate Smart Ag and Forestry Strategy. It's not official, but sort of the breadth of practices that we're looking at. Cropland management, like no-till, cover crops, nutrient management, grazing and pasture, rotational grazing, improved forage, animal systems, manure digesters, solid separators, lagoon covers, and also feed additives to reduce enteric. Land use change, so, you know, CRP, retirement of marginal lands, but also, you know, things like hedgerows and buffers and grass waterways, and then on-farm energy, so improving our fuel efficiency on farms and our electricity efficiency as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie, who, as I mentioned, has been leading on the flip side of this, which is the resilience and adaptation piece.
Thank you, Mindy. So our two reports are really bookends to each other. So as Mindy described, one of the tasks laid out in the executive order was to update USDA's prior adaptation plan from 2014 with a new action plan for climate adaptation and resilience. This revised plan was expected to contain a reanalysis of USDA's vulnerabilities to climate change and identification of actions to address these issues. The plan also includes cross-cutting department scale actions to integrate climate adaptation and resilience building into our mission, programs, activities, and operations. Climate change poses a significant risk to agriculture and forests across the United States and the communities that support and depend upon them. So these are the 5 vulnerabilities we identified that will have broad department scale implications. Climate change threatens growth in agricultural productivity through changes. Oh, looks like we lost Mindy there. So let me see if I can share my screen. Lorena, could you pull up the slides possibly? Or Steve?
Yeah, Stephanie, I've got them pulled up. Let me see if I can go ahead and share that.
Thanks so much for that. I think we're about on slide 5.
Are you able to see that?
Yeah, if you can just switch it to a presenter view and then flip to, yeah, you can keep going. Great, thank you. Oh, well, back one more. Can you go back one more? Thanks for that. Sorry, we've got a big thunderstorm in DC right now. So as I was saying, climate change threatens growth in agricultural productivity through changes in temperature and precipitation, increased disease and pest pressures, decline in pollinator health, and reduced forage quantity and quality. Hey, Steve, I'm sorry. I think it's switched off.
I am sorry. I think
Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep going. Climate change also impacts the water cycle and is resulting in earlier snowmelt, reduced water supply, more intense and frequent drought like we're seeing now, and degraded water quality, all of which will alter crop and animal production and the health of forest and rangeland systems. We know that climate change disproportionately impacts socially disadvantaged, low-income, minority, tribal, and rural communities, and these communities' abilities to adapt to climate change is often limited by financial, social, and other constraints. Climate change is causing more frequent, intense, disruptive events like hurricanes, floods, and fires, which can again have significant impacts on agriculture and forestry. And finally, the increasing frequency and severity of these disturbances will have consequences for the natural and built infrastructure on public lands. Here I've highlighted just some of the actions that USDA proposes to prepare USDA and its stakeholders for these vulnerabilities, including encouraging uptake of on-farm adaptation strategies and practices, many of which are the same as the practices that Mindy discussed, adapting existing USDA programs to account for the increased risks posed by climate change, engaging with these vulnerable communities, and ensuring that USDA programs don't pose additional risks to these communities, and addressing forest restoration needs and building resilience to wildfire. Building on this vulnerability assessment, we identified 5 cross-cutting actions that USDA will take to prepare the agriculture and forestry sectors to be resilient in a changing climate. You're on the next slide, please. The first action is to build resilience to climate change across landscapes with investments in soil and forest health. This action will lean heavily on the work of NRCS and other FPAC agencies and the Forest Service, provide technical and financial assistance to implement climate smart practices. Second is to increase climate outreach and education, promote the application and adoption of these climate smart adaptation strategies. This will involve the work of USDA's climate hubs and NIFA in partnership with a cooperative extension service and others to deliver resources to farmers, ranchers, and landowners. Third is to broaden access and availability of climate data at regional and local scales for both external stakeholders and internal use. USDA will support the curation of scientific information into decision support tools, provide guidance on the benefits and outcomes when farmers have to make climate risk decisions. Fourth, similar to the 90-day progress report, is to increase support for research and development of climate smart practices and technologies to inform USDA planning, decision-making, and programs. Some examples of these priority areas will include evaluating the efficacy of adaptive practices, genetic studies to identify climate resilient species, looking at the impacts of climate change on pollinator behavior, and modeling studies to project affordability and adoption of climate smart practices. And finally, monitoring networks to observe the effects and responses to climate change are also important. The last cross-cutting action is to leverage the USDA climate hubs as a framework to support USDA mission areas in delivering adaptation science, technology, and tools. This will take advantage of the Climate Hub's unique position to work across USDA organizational boundaries. Go to the next slide, please. So both USDA's adaptation plan and the Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry strategy emphasize the role of USDA's climate hubs in supporting much of this work. The aim of USDA's 10 regional hubs is to develop and deliver science-based, region-specific information and technologies to agricultural and land managers to enable climate-informed decision-making. The hubs accomplish this through a combination of science and data synthesis, tool and technology co-development, and outreach, convening, and training. If you haven't checked out the Climate Hub's website before, I highly recommend it. It's a wealth of information, and it's great because it's all region specific. So the Climate Hubs will also be instrumental in addressing another part of the department's adaptation plan, which is climate literacy among USDA's workforce. Next slide, please, Steve. As we know, USDA has nearly 100,000 employees at over 4,000 locations across the United States and the world, with a diverse range of roles, responsibilities, and backgrounds. This means we have varying levels of experience discussing and incorporating this climate thinking into our work. So enhancing climate literacy across the workforce will be an essential element of integrating climate preparedness into USDA's missions, programs, operations, and management. Already, various mission areas and agencies host regular webinars, and the Forest Service hosts the Climate Change Resource Center with climate training modules. To expand on these efforts and ensure that we reach a larger swath of USDA staff, the Adaptation Plan recommends convening a climate literacy working group to look at knowledge gaps and needs of specific agencies, and then strategically expanding access to training and climate information for USDA staff. Our office is currently developing a climate science seminar series that will be geared for USDA staff with a wide range of roles and expertise to help them feel prepared to incorporate climate thinking into their work. Next slide, please, Steve. Finally, just to outline some of the next steps on both of these aspects of our office's work. For the climate smart agriculture and forestry strategy, we're currently working to develop the specific actions and policies based on the recommendations outlined in the plan, and reviewing the many comments that were received through the Federal Register notice and the listening sessions that Mindy mentioned. And then those will be used to inform future stakeholder outreach and engagement. On the climate adaptation and resilience side, as Mindy mentioned, we're currently finalizing this plan and preparing it for release in the next weeks and months. And at the same time, we're now developing guidance for relevant USDA agencies and staff offices to develop their own agency level adaptation plans. And that's when some of these details will really start to come out and become more solidified. So thank you everyone for your time and attention, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of the panel. Thanks, Steve.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it. Appreciate you rolling with the storm, literally here. So, like we said, I see a couple questions have come in. We'll save the questions for the end. So I'd like to turn now to our next speaker, though, and that's Cynthia Given. Cynthia is the agricultural counselor for the UK and the Republic of Ireland, obviously with USDA FAS, and is going to be speaking to us about the importance of marketing sustainability in the UK, obviously a market that many of us pay close attention to on this topic. So Cynthia, I'll turn it over to you. I know we're going to try to put your slides up, and if it doesn't work on your end, I'll load them on my side. So we'll give it a shot with you here.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. So yes, today I'm going to talk about the importance of marketing sustainability in the UK and the EU. Wait 1 second. I'm going to switch this a little if I can. Okay, I don't know how. Anyway. I don't know how to go to the next slide. Oh, okay, there I go. Anyway, yes, I'm going to talk about market promotion in the UK and the EU. As you all know, we're leading up to COP26, which is going to be in November here in Glasgow, Scotland, and then beyond. So COP26 is really seen as like the kind of pivotal point where all governments are going to take further action and steps and make commitments on climate change. In fact, our aim for climate, agriculture innovation mission for climate will be highlighted at COP26. So first I'm going to talk about why I believe the US industry and we as an office believe the US industry should be promoting sustainability. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the UK food and drink sector as it is right now. Then I'm going to go to how to promote sustainability using Asme as a case study. They've done a great job here in the UK. And then what you can do next, the next steps and how you can use our office as a resource. Okay, so the UK food and drink sector, as you know, is very advanced. Brexit happened, and so the UK is no longer in the EU, but in a way, it is actually far ahead of the EU in a way in terms of sustainability, climate change, and the consumers are very sophisticated in terms of what they're looking for. So based on several studies that were done and surveys, the UK consumers will actually pay more for sustainability. So it's not just that they intend to, but they actually do pay more when it comes down to it. The UK retailers are already promoting sustainability. So they're not waiting for the rules and regulations to come into place by the UK government. The retailers already are promoting sustainability. Also, customers care about these issues. They care about the environment. They care about animal welfare, climate change, labor practices, and so many issues. So they really are looking for that in the products that they buy. The UK and the EU regulations are moving in this direction, and also they're influencing the world. As you may have seen, the UK has signed nearly 100. In fact, today they signed a few with, I think, Norway and Iceland and a couple other countries, a few free trade agreements. And they're just like the EU has influenced greatly the world, they are trying to do the same as well. And then, as I mentioned, the Food Systems Summit is coming up, and COP26. So these are all big conferences that are in the media a lot, and the government is talking about it. And so it's getting UK consumers even more interested in this. Okay, so this is a slide just representing the survey that I mentioned. So as you can see, it's not just the UK, but in Germany, that consumers say they are willing to pay and actually do pay more for products that talk about the sustainability practices. US consumers also say that. So whatever you're doing at home, you should do a little bit more of it to promote your products over here. And then another interesting thing that this one survey came up with is that younger generations are more in favor of buying and paying more for sustainability. And actually, even though it says like baby boomers are a little bit lower on the spectrum, 53% is still really high. And also baby boomers may not intentionally purchase for sustainability reasons or for the environment, but they do tend to pay more for their purchases, for their products. So as opposed to buying cheaper products. So, okay, yes, so the UK retailers, as I mentioned, have not waited for any or all of the laws to come into place. All of these retailers that are listed here have signed up for the BRC, British Retail Consortium's Better Retail, Better World campaign. These are all really big companies. An example is Sainsbury's, which is kind of like a giant food in the DC area, or Safeway, but actually it's a little bit bigger than that because they in some stores they sell clothes and TVs and things like that. So working in collaboration with suppliers, farmers, and growers, Sainsbury's developed its own independent sustainability standards covering a breadth of economic, social, and environmental issues. These standards drive the development of responsible sourcing practices and build on existing independent third-party standards. So as I mentioned, the BRC, the British Retail Consortium, it has a Better Retail, Better World campaign, which commits the retail industry to build a fairer, more sustainable economy in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And BSI, the British Standards Institute, also is using the UN Sustainable Development Goals as their baseline. BRC aims to have collective action from the retail industry to meet the biggest global challenges of the coming decades, such as modern slavery and decent work, sustainable economic growth, inequalities, climate change, and responsible consumption and production. So as I said, it isn't just sustainability, but all of these types of things that we had not been focusing on in the past that are really coming to the forefront and need to be highlighted by our industry. The other thing you will see a lot here in the UK and the EU are schemes and also labeling. So many of you have probably heard of the Red Tractor scheme and maybe also the LEAF. LEAF stands for Linking Environment and Farming. It's a mark that you will see on many products. Red Tractor Assurance is for meat products where they're talking about enhancing welfare, certified origin, and it's developed by the National Farmers Union and other farm and food lobby groups. And LEAF Mark is a leading global assurance system recognizing more sustainably farmed products. So whenever a consumer sees this label, then they feel like they can trust it. And not only can they trust the quality of it, but they trust that that company that is selling it is doing something positive for the environment. Another thing that's become or starting to become a little bit more popular are these eco-friendly stores, these eco-friendly stores. And here's an example of one large store near Leeds where they're supporting basically everything green and trying to use much less packaging so people bring their own containers and refill and reuse, as it says there in the picture. The other thing that's very popular is recycling. Lucozade is kind of like Gatorade in the United States, and they just committed to using 100% recycled plastic and the labels for each of the bottles that they sell. The Lucozade changes are going to represent a savings of 3,500 tons of plastic and 9,000 tons of carbon dioxide, contributing to Lucozade's net zero and 100% sustainable plastic packaging ambition. And Suntory is another juice company. This is like black currant juice. And it's also committed to 100% sustainable packaging and net zero by 2030, driving circularity and minimum waste. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to recognize that the consumers are very savvy and they're not just looking at one thing or another thing when they're looking at agricultural products. So diversity and inclusion, for instance, is also very important, even though that's not necessarily something one would think of when in the United States, when someone goes and buys, you know, a milk product or cereal or something like that. They want to know that they want to know about these companies. They want to know what their social practices are. Labor practices are getting scrutinized. Water usage and animal welfare, of course, is big. The UK has been the leader in animal welfare in the world, I believe. And as Steve mentioned, our office also covers Ireland, which is still part of the EU. And just wanted to share with you all that the same trend is in Ireland. Ireland has this seal, as you can see on the bottom. It's called Origin Ireland. And in fact, there are parts of the UK, such as Scotland, that is thinking of doing something similar to that, Origin Scotland, for instance. Basically, when people see that seal, they know that the product has been, they've looked at the supply chain, the retailers looked at the supply chain, and it has passed various checks to be able to receive that seal by Board BIA, which is the Food Marketing Board of Ireland. Now let me tell you about the Asme Approach. First of all, I want to thank the Asme representative, Sarah Johnson, and her team, who is here in London. They are doing a great job here, as are many other cooperators and their representatives here. We could only use one example. So let me start, let me share with you all the Asme Approach. Fortunately for them, they had done a lot of research before the Seaspiracy film came out on Netflix. And so they were prepared already to kind of share their story and go on an all-out campaign when the film came out. So it worked out really well for them. So what they had done starting from a couple years ago is some research. There was a study done by the Sustainable Restaurant Association. This is a UK organization that was established about 11 years ago with 328 food service organizations and businesses and 82 suppliers. And that survey identified several gaps with Asme's marketing in terms of the chefs not really understanding what Alaska Seafood's sustainability situation was. And so the second thing they did was to establish key messaging for the trade, and then they reached out to consumers, but they started with the trade. And the third thing they did was to implement a sustainability campaign. So the research that they did, they also, there was another Cantor research that also identified some areas where they could focus on. So one is that provenance builds trust. So a lot of times people think of provenance as like locally grown, but in this case, provenance just means the origin, where it comes from. So it was important for Asme to identify where the seafood comes from and give a little bit more information about Alaska itself. And not only did it build trust, it built awareness. Secondly, the research identified, as I mentioned earlier, that the consumers are willing to pay more, and that is real. And then thirdly, that they should focus on retail and food service first. So as you can see by the logo, they did something really creative. They created something called Alaska Seafood University, which I think is really cool. It's a course that you can take online, and they just launched it in March. And already over 520 chefs have already completed the course. And so basically what that means is that they know a lot more about Alaska and the seafood and how it's sustainable, and they can pass that on to the consumer. And then they learned that timing is key. So there was World Ocean Day recently. So they tied their campaigns around and their messaging around World Ocean Day, and they'll continue to find key special international dates or dates that mean something to the UK to tie it in with their messaging. And then also their campaign has been almost solely digital. They've used a lot of social media and a lot of interactive campaigns through social media. So instead of it being like a lecture, it's almost more like a conversation. They've also done some ads in print, and those have been very successful. So what can you do, and how FAS London can help you and promote sustainability? What have we been doing to promote sustainability through social media? So we also started a social media campaign last year. We have a Twitter account, which you can see here. We have an Instagram account called Savor the States. We're actually really proud of the name. As you all probably know, in the UK, the perception of US has gone down or has been tainted a lot by the negative press that came about ever since, well, it's been around for a long time, but actually it intensified when the free trade agreement talks began. And so we've had to really work hard to change the perception of this negative perception of US agriculture. So initially we started doing kind of a myth busting thing, but then we realized that was not really the way to go. And what we should be doing, what we're now turning our effort to do, is more of an education campaign. So educating the UK consumer on exactly how each of our cooperators are producing their food sustainably, and also what you're doing with other things to help the environment. So, and how we can help you is through events, even through COVID, and actually the UK is opening up pretty soon. We do tastings, we do seminars, we do roundtables, and we can connect you with importers, retailers, consumers, media, government officials. And one thing that we're finding that's really helpful is to connect the consumer, connect the farmers here in the UK with farmers in the US, and also just tell stories and case studies of what you all are doing. So besides Asme, for instance, I know the Almond Board has done a lot of stuff for showcasing what they're doing sustainably. The craft beer group as well, Ocean Spray Cranberries. So there have been some of you all who have showcased your efforts, but I really think we really need to ramp it up, because it's just the only way to go to kind of maintain and increase the market share at this point. Until we have anything else, COP is just going to get us started, and things are going to get more in the press with regards to sustainability. We're also doing a cookbook, which we're very excited about, and thanks to all of you who've already helped us with this. We're doing cookbook with recipes from around the world, but what we're doing is at each page for each recipe, we're going to put like a little asterisk next to the US product, and at the bottom we're going to say a little blurb about how sustainable it's produced, or something, say how the water conservation, or anything that we can say that where the consumer can feel like it's connected a little bit more and feels more confident making that recipe or using US products and things like that. And then,
hey, Cynthia, I am so sorry to interrupt you. I'm hearing the Oscars music in the background.
Okay.
We got to keep it moving. So
okay, this is the last slide. So basically what we're going to do next is basically kind of connect the consumer with, after they hear all these stories and they want to buy it, so where exactly they can purchase it in the UK and enjoy their products. So thank you all very much. I will stop sharing. We're always, I wanted to mention also, I know there's the, we have Delicious also in FAS Berlin. They have their own social media. We work closely with them, and our colleagues in The Hague as well, the Netherlands. But please feel free to reach out to us directly, and we'll be happy to help you. Okay, I'm trying to figure out.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Cynthia. And sorry about that. Time flies when we're having fun here, so we'll keep our program moving along here. So I'll introduce our final speaker today on the panel, who's coming from our cooperator community, Cheyenne McAdapper, director of the U.S. Meat Export Federation, and Cheyenne's going to talk a little bit about the global messaging of sustainability of the U.S. meat supply and how you market on sustainability. So Cheyenne, I will turn it over to you here. And Cheyenne, you might be on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
Can you see the right slides, not presenter view?
Yeah, we can see your slides. It's not in presenter mode, but we can see them.
I always share the wrong screen. Okay, let me try and share these again real quick. So I will try and condense these maybe into less than 10 minutes. Steve, do you think so we can try and keep on time?
Will do.
Okay. All right, let's try again. Any better?
Yeah, perfect. Good to go.
Okay. All right, so I will be quick and sweet, always the joy of going last. So I have quite a few slides, but again, a lot of these are just resources. We're obviously happy to share anything else at the end, but thanks for having me today. I'll be the sole cooperator speaking on behalf of, I would assume, many cooperators, but thanks for letting us be the example here. I want to start by saying that this is very much a team effort. So when we talk about, what we do in regards to messaging in the meat supply chain, we are utilizing research, technical resources, life cycle assessment information, infographics, et cetera, from other groups that also utilize checkoff dollars like we do, like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the National Pork Board. We work with other groups like the North American Meat Institute on the plant side. So we really see this as a team effort to best utilize our dollars, bring all the minds together. So we appreciate that relationship, and you're going to see some of their content as I move through here. Okay, so I want to start with a few examples of what we have been doing in this space. We have been talking about sustainability and animal welfare in addition to our typical messaging on both nutrition and quality of U.S. red meat products. But we have been working in this space for some time, but we are starting to see some changes, which I'll talk about in a few slides. So as you can see, a lot of this work, again, we take what our producer groups do in the U.S., we give it to our international offices, and they really take it and they tailor that messaging to their audience in whatever region or country they're in. So like in Korea, they made animated videos. We've done videos in Mexico. We've done white papers. On the right is an example of our some social media content from our South America office. Obviously, everything has to be translated if we're taking it from the US groups. And then also starting to do more work with posts around the world. And on the left, you'll see an example of an article that we wrote on sustainability and animal welfare with post in Madrid that they were able to use, get some social media content out of. Websites, USMEF Japan has an entire section of their website dedicated to this. So you can see we're working to translate the infographics as we get them. So again, not reinventing the wheel, just utilizing a lot of the good content we already have access to. And then I also want to mention the US Sustainability Alliance. This is a USDA GBI funded project. USEC is the lead cooperator on it. We got involved a few years ago, and now we're heavily involved in the Management Council. So we really see this as an opportunity to not only highlight our specific red meat messaging in this space, but also to highlight total US agriculture sustainability messaging, which has become critically important this year due to two reasons. So two things happened or are really starting to happen this year that I think is changing how a lot of cooperators work within the sustainability messaging space. The first of which is the EU Farm to Fork and other Green Deal policies. So we have an idea of a lot of the targets that we're going to see come out of these policies, but the legislative process to actually write, how that will be implemented is starting now. And because everything we see within Farm to Fork is really just going to continue to take tools out of their producers' toolbox, which will make them more inefficient and obviously probably result in some protectionist measures that may impact what we actually have on our export certificates and dictate changes to our export requirements. So there's obviously major concerns there. But again, I think it's an opportunity because, like I said, we're seeing Europe really take tools out of their producers' toolbox to produce food as they see fit. And that's really counterintuitive to the US model of producing food, which is really the embracing of technology, innovation, and education. And producers have this full breadth of tools within their toolbox in regards to precision agriculture, whether it's use of growth promotants, use of bioengineered technologies, whether it's just educational resources through USDA. They can really work with whatever resources they have based on, you know, the climate, the geography that they're working with within the US. So I think this is a good opportunity to really counteract the negative image that US agriculture has, because we are so efficient in what we do, and really efficiency equals sustainability. And so, you know, just because we have economies of scale, we've really taken a hit on the imaging in that regard. And this is an opportunity to show this as a model to efficiently feed Americans in the world. So I won't spend too much time on the UN Food Systems Summit. This is the other big topic that's happening this year. I think that's impacting or changing a lot of, I'd say, our total US ag sustainability messaging. I believe you guys are talking about this in your meetings this week anyway, so I will just very, very quickly gloss over this. But this has changed what we are doing, and that is not only promoting the sustainability benefits of US red meat and in our hog and cattle production systems, but this is really two things we're seeing coming out of the UN. It's an attack, our partners, you know, submitting game-changing solutions within the Food Systems Summit. It's an attack on animal protein. As you can see on the bottom, there's many groups saying we just need to get rid of or significantly reduce animal protein consumption and production. And it's an attack on intensive agriculture, which is probably what we do in the US. It's kind of like factory farming, not really sure what that means, but again, this is an opportunity for the US to both industry, I would say our government, USDA, to really tout, you know, our model of technology and innovation here as a solution to a lot of the sustainable development goals. And again, the attack on animal protein, this is really an all hands on deck. We've joined with other international groups, including other animal protein like dairy, poultry, egg, etc., because we just can't farm all the land in the world. Already a majority, as we all know, majority of the land in the world is not arable. And the only way to produce food off of non-arable land, at least to scale at this point, is the use of ruminants or, you know, animals like cattle or sheep that can take human inedible material like grass and make high quality protein like meat and milk. So the other argument obviously being that livestock eat, you know, crops that could go to human use. That's just not the case. Majority of livestock crops in the world are human inedible anyway. That argument just doesn't hold water. Okay, I'm going to speed through these, Steve. So I just want to touch on a few. This is not comprehensive because I really try to condense within 15 minutes, which, as you'll see, is a struggle for me to do. But really just want to highlight a few of our key messaging points specifically within the red meat area. First and foremost, you know, there's a lot of discussion on beef and deforestation globally. Obviously, a lot of that's focused on Brazil. We already see, especially in Europe, you know, at least one retailer saying they won't buy beef from Brazil due to this issue. We do not attack Brazil on this because I think, unfortunately, the deforestation discussion isn't good for any cattle production globally. But I do like to always clarify that this is not an issue in the US. And we don't import our feed grains as well. So talk about pork specifically. I think what was mentioned before, maybe in the Q&A, is I think kind of what's happening on the farm side is we feel like we don't get credit for the decades and decades of advances we've made within this space. So when you look at other countries, you know, that can probably make huge dents in their emissions in the ag space, you know, due to adopting certain production practices, et cetera. When we're already so efficient, we're not going to see huge swings there. So what we're trying to do is really highlight we're already world leaders in this space and we'll continue to improve. We're just not going to see huge swings because, again, we're already so efficient, and efficiency equals sustainability. So pork, already a negligible amount of emissions in the US. And continuous improvement is the name of the game here. They continue to get better, especially when we talk about resource management like land and water, and that will continue to improve. We are hearing that the pork industry may announce new metrics and goals maybe by the end of the year, which will be incredibly ambitious globally. And we'll definitely make sure and report on those when they're ready to announce. Something, again, I like to highlight, especially as we know our neighbors across the pond do import a lot of feed grains, is that we are just blessed geographically with the Midwest. It's the best place in the world to grow row crops. And so we have corn and soy right next door, literally on our hog farms. They don't have to be hauled across an ocean. We know how they're grown. Again, deforestation isn't an issue. So we are really lucky to have that. And that's obviously why most of our pork production is in the Midwest. Okay, moving on to beef. Bottom line is when you look at emissions, we're already the most sustainable beef producers in the world. And that's due to a few different reasons I won't get into here based on time, but beef research, Beef It's What's for Dinner, has excellent resources on this. But really the bottom line is it's our grain finishing model. When you finish cattle to slaughter weight in 12 to 20 months, they're releasing less methane than grain finish that's taken 2 to 4 years, utilizing less water, et cetera. So not saying this is the only way to raise cattle, but this gives us a huge benefit in regards to emissions. Again, you could say, well, are they taking, all that crop ground that could be used for humans? But in 2020, only about 7% or the size that black mark of corn harvested in the US went to cattle feed. So non-issue. And then I don't want to gloss over our plants are obviously doing a lot of work in this area. Plant focus is water use, packaging, recycled materials, et cetera. I just pulled this as an example that came out this week, but all of the companies have made commitments in this space. And then I want to finish with just one last topic, that's US specific that we really like to highlight. And I think Canada has been doing a better job of this than we are, but this is something we're starting to ramp up on. And so I think when you ask Americans and anyone else globally, what are some of the most vulnerable ecosystems in the world, they're going to say the Great Barrier Reef, they're going to say the Amazon. And I would say, well, you forgot to say the Great Plains in North America. Not something that you just complain about when you drive across 70 in Kansas or 80 in Nebraska. So this is something I personally am very passionate about as a cattle producer on the high plains of Colorado. But we're starting to learn more and more about the true, huge vault of carbon that we could have and continue to grow within Middle America. And, we now know that prairies have the ability to store as much carbon below the ground as forests can store above the ground. And we know that livestock grazing helps that. Overgrazing is not good. So properly managed grazing improves plant productivity, improves soil health, adds manure, and that grazing pressure is obviously needed, which is why even programs like USDA CRP programs require maintenance to either hay or graze, because we know that overgrowth is not good for prairie health in multiple regards. So. And then I will finish up by talking about, we all need to be better about talking about the 3 pillars of sustainability. So obviously the focus today was a lot of environmental, but, to me, sustainability is also leaving something for the next generation. So we have, farms and ranches in the US. The only way that I'm going to leave anything for my daughter is if we are profitable. So profitability is not a sin. So we need to talk about economic sustainability as well. And then lastly, social. Rural America only exists due to agriculture. And based on the map we see here, the green is the farm ground. We can't farm most of the good chunk of the dry west. We can't farm a lot of the heavily forested east. So rural communities and areas that cannot be farmed, like this picture where I grew up in New Mexico, only exist due to grazing animals like cattle or sheep. So when we talk about the vitality of rural America, we can't gloss over the importance of livestock in regards to that. Okay, I will finish up. Picture my cows on the prairie doing their part. Thanks, Stephen.
All right, Cheyenne, thanks so much for that. Really appreciate you getting that message through and expeditiously as well. And I have been given the green light from Lorena to take us a few minutes late in this session so that we can hold our Q&A. So I will go ahead and get us started. There has been a couple questions that have come in, but I'll start with Stephanie, and I think Mindy's back on as well. So I will pose this one to you all because it's actually come in two or three different ways. So I'm going to paraphrase. So it's been mentioned several times already. I think the Secretary Vilsack also mentioned it. U.S. farmers and ranchers, U.S. agricultural and forestry industry has been looking at sustainability for a very long time and has made great strides on this. Is that going to be accounted for or captured in any way in a lot of the baseline metrics that are being produced under the climate smart agriculture policy? I mean, are they going to get credit in some way for what has already been done, or is it just a look starting with today and looking forward?
I guess I can take that. I'm working a little bit on the metrics piece. I mean, yeah, we've been tracking. We have a lot of good tools for tracking progress of our agriculture sector through our surveys. So we have seen the linear sector. So, you know, what we're doing is just trying to move the needle a little bit more. We know that we've already been improving. So the purpose behind the tracking and reporting is to make sure that we know what we're getting, that we can report those up like into our programs, so know what our programs are achieving in terms of climate reductions in addition to what's already been achieved. And also that we can report those at a national level through our GHG inventory, which we produce every year for the to track our progress towards our Paris climate obligations. So yeah, what we're looking to do is to improve that and to make sure that also at the program level, we're able to do that and we can tell the story of US agriculture. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, like what has already been done and the great work that our producers have already been doing is captured and will be, just want to make sure that we are able to capture that moving forward.
Great, thanks for that, Mindy. And just a quick follow-up question to that. For those of us on the marketing side who would like to use that information towards marketing efforts in the future and our market development efforts, that information will be available to cooperators and groups in order to start making those arguments in certain markets?
That would be my hope. We're trying to improve the data and also improve the availability of that data through several platforms on USDA. So, you know, maybe it's worth a discussion with certain groups, like the kind of data that they'd like to see that can help them tell their story. That might be a good way to make sure that we're giving you what you need. But yeah, we definitely want to make improvements in making that available and you know, tracking what our programs are doing, which somehow in terms of environmental benefits, which hasn't been well done in the past.
Very good. Thanks, Mindy. Cheyenne, I'm going to turn to you for this one. A couple questions came in regarding the statistics that you showed very quickly regarding greenhouse gas emissions, different production systems for both cattle, pork. And so some of the questions were related to where are you getting that information? And that was the question I had for you as well is, are you developing as USMEF a lot of that information, or are you working with partners in the industry to get that information and start utilizing it in marketing efforts?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So all the domestic research is not done by us. It's done by other producer groups, like I said, the National Pork Board, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and a lot of that is Chekhov funded research. So they're working with their producers, working with their university contacts, produce it. We may use their infographics like you saw here, and then we'll also create our own content sometimes to translate. So all of it is very much a partnership, and we have routine calls with them. They keep us updated on new research efforts, things coming down the pike, so that we can coordinate on that messaging both domestically and globally.
Very good, thank you. And Cynthia, I'll pose the last question here to you. You touched on it at the end of your presentation, but a couple questions have come in following up on that. How best can posts work with cooperators to get that sustainability message out? How can posts in various countries really take that message that Cheyenne has been working on, for example, and change it to the local language, the local culture, and work to get that kind of message out?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there are many ways. I think social media is the best way, but most importantly, we've been working with a lot of the cooperators. The very first thing we need all the cooperators to do is to send us everything that you're doing. Send us the links that where you're highlighting sustainability, and then we basically put that on our social media. We use that for every meeting that we have with the government. We use that when we're talking to people on the street, to anybody. Just arm us with talking points, and not just like general talking points like, oh, of course we're more sustainable, of course we care about water. No, give us some specifics, some data, and we'll be happy to use it, amplify it in any way we can. And I saw it was Alicia who asked that question. So Alicia, she's coming to Europe very soon this summer. So feel free to reach out to our office or any of the other offices, in particular Berlin and The Hague. We'd be happy to give you some ideas.
Very good. Thank you, Cynthia. Well, we're only about a minute over, so I think at that point, I'm going to go ahead and yank myself off the stage. I want to thank our panelists today for presenting the information and answering the questions, and also rolling quite literally with the storm as it came through Washington, D.C. here, and all the tech issues that created for us. So thank you all. And Chuck, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to all the panels for a very interesting presentation. And he's right. Right now, I'm sitting looking out my window, and the dark clouds are rolling over. I'm hearing thunder in the distance, so I better speak quick. Right now, we have Daniel Whitley talking about 7 factors impacting U.S. and global agricultural markets. He began serving as the acting administrator of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Foreign Agricultural Service in January of 2021. Prior to this role, Whitley had served as the Associate Administrator for Policy Analysis, where he led the Global Market Analysis and the Trade Policy and Geographic Affairs units. We'll turn it over to you, Daniel. And I know you will also be bringing in one of your staff, Vincent Fusaro, toward the end of your presentation. So the stage is yours.
All right, thank you, Chuck. And I got 2 problems this afternoon, everybody. One, I have a lot to say, but 2, I don't have a lot of time. So got to get through a lot of material real quick. But let me begin by saying, as always, thank you for the invite. Thank you for having me participate. And as I always say, I do think the public-private partnership between FAS and the cooperative community is the shining example for all of the U.S. government. And I continue to marvel at how well we're able to work together for the good of American agriculture as we open markets and expand U.S. ag exports worldwide. So kudos to everybody on the FAS staff, and kudos to all of those in the stakeholder and cooperative community that makes this partnership work each and every single day. What I thought I would do is just give a quick update on sort of the state of FAS. There's been a lot going on over the last year and a half, 2 years. Then I would probably give just a quick overview of the 7 factors presentation we recently developed, and then finally wrap up by introducing you all to a new, well, not new, but returning team member to the FAS family. But let me start with sort of the state of FAS. I got to be honest, I really think that we are in a very, very good position to carry out our mission. I think what we've witnessed and what we've learned about FAS over the last year and a half is that our strength is the talent of the staff. And if you all knew all of the hard work that everybody has done during this COVID pandemic, you would be amazed at how dedicated the staff is to the mission of the agency and serving you, one of our core stakeholder groups. We were able to achieve a lot in some very challenging and difficult circumstances. Obviously, we're still dealing with the pandemic, albeit a lot less than we were, just months ago, with an increase in the vaccine, with an increase in some return to normalcy. We're hopeful that we can get back together and do business as we used to at some point in the future. but it's going to be a while. Safety and health is the #1 priority of the administration, of USDA, and even FAS leadership. A couple of points I do want to share with you with respect to returning back to the office. First, the department submitted a reentry plan to OPM, and it was approved that USDA would begin reentering employees into the workplace no sooner than October 1st. I want to repeat that, no sooner than October 1st. There are additional steps that go along with that, including negotiations with the union, including making sure we've met all of CDC's requirements to return employees back to the agency and the office building safely. But that is the earliest that we would start seeing employees be asked to come back to the building. The second point I know which is of interest to this group is travel. Right now, the message is mission critical travel only. There's some discretion being given to the agencies, but in practice, we're still checking in with the department as to what fits their definition of mission critical. So travel is slowly starting to loosen up, but I wouldn't expect just a broad jump in travel operations, particularly overseas, anytime soon. I know many of you are interested in visiting and having meetings on the South Building campus. We are starting to see some of that loosen up. Obviously, there are a number of control points in place. Obviously, vaccinated individuals have one set of rules versus non-vaccinated individuals. We're still looking at mission critical, mostly for in-person meetings. We've had a few, but some of the meetings have not met that threshold. So it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but I did want to give you all an update on sort of re-entry and travel and meeting in person. And, it's meetings like this that remind us how much we do miss getting together in person. I can tell you this is one of my favorite weeks of the entire year. This week, the week we spend in November in Baltimore, really a chance to just get out and have that camaraderie, that family type of feel, not only with our FAS family, but with also the cooperator community. So we miss it. We really, really do. And we want to get back to whatever the new norm is as soon as possible, but we've got to be certain that safety is the #1 priority. So that's kind of where we are in terms of COVID and returning back to the building safely and sort of travel and meeting. The next thing I want to discuss is sort of FAS operations. This past April, we were able to successfully bring back all of our HR operations in-house. As many of you are aware, we were contracting a lot of those services out with APHIS, a sister agency here in USDA, but we've brought a team in, and we're very confident in the team. We're very pleased with the work they're doing and embracing the HR functions within the agency, and it's going well. It's going well. We're still figuring out some things as we get to them, but we're very happy that we can kind of control our own HR destiny in terms of recruitment and hiring, all of the staffing needs, the training needs for all of our staff. Obviously, all of the personnel decisions and functions we have to manage for the agency. Having that under the FAS umbrella will really improve our operations and our customer service to our staff. Another highlight I wanted to share with all of you is, we did make the adjustment to the FMD program year to align with the MAP program year. So we're hopeful that is improving the service delivery for the Foreign Market Development Program this upcoming year. We're constantly trying to look at things that make sense to do. We're constantly trying to improve customer service and our internal controls. And we hope that is just one of many, many efforts to improve the way we do business and our collaboration with our partners. Also, the UES process will review all requests for export program funding that was submitted by the June 25th deadline, with approvals in place by the start of the January 1 program year. This includes MAP, FMD, GBI, TASK, QSP, EMP, all of those programs are included. So hopefully we will have a very, very successful program year with all of the programs that we operate and collaborate with you all on. The other update I wanted to give you all before we get into sort of the 7 factors presentation is on the grants directive. As most of you are aware by now, we've decided to put the directive we had in place on pause. We've decided to supplant it with a memo and give us 1 year to kind of figure out what works best for our agency responsibility and requirements, but also what works best for you, the cooperator community, and the stakeholders. I think we're like-minded in that we want to do what's simple, what makes sense. We want to be in good standing with all of our requirements with grant policy in the federal government, but we don't want to have a burdensome policy just for the sake of it being burdensome. We want to make sure anything that we're asked to do, ask you all to do, that is something that we have to do. So we're looking and uncovering all options available to make this as smoothly and effective as possible. So over the next year, we will review all of our grant procedures. We will have some listening sessions with stakeholders, many of you, and we look forward to having a revised directive within the coming year. And again, these are conversations that we will have, that we want your input, we want your feedback, we want your participation, so we can kind of get this right and get this solved. You know, my belief is once we do the hard work and solve this once, it's done and we can move forward and not have to worry about revisiting it again. So there may not be any shortcuts in the hard work we have to put out, but once we do that hard work, I think it will make the user friendliness of our grants process and procedures much more tolerable, as you all have so much to deal with without an extra burden to get this process done. So that's kind of where we are on grants. And with that, let me turn our attention to the actual 7 factors presentation. I want to just give you guys a quick overview on. I think we probably could just go to slide 3. There we go. So 10 years ago, we developed a presentation called I think at that time it was the 8 factors impacting US and global ag markets. And at the time we developed this presentation, we were dealing with almost record commodity prices. We were dealing with an increase in food prices. There was concern globally about food security issues. And there were just a number of factors that sort of led us to believe we were losing sort of control of the conversation of the importance of agriculture and strong markets and price discovery, all of those things that we know to be true that impacts the marketplace for agriculture. So in thinking about this a couple of months ago, you know, I was thinking the world of trade policy has really changed. The way we think about trade, the actions we've seen over the last 5 years has really, really changed. Things that we thought might not even be possible a decade ago are basically normal behavior now. So I thought we might want to update this presentation and really think about what's the future of US and global ag markets. What are those factors that will define the future for agriculture? And we came up with these 7. And I'll go through them and just say a word or two about each one. But others may have additional factors they want to add. Others may say, take this factor off. That's fine. Part of what we want to do is drive the discussion and inform the debate. But these are the 7 that we've kind of resonated around here in FAS that we think we should pay very close attention to and sort of understand their role over the next decade. So the first being global economic growth. This is one of my favorites because here what we're talking about is the growth of the middle class. Over the next decade, India and China will add almost 300 million new households of middle class consumers to the marketplace. 300 million households. And this is important because we know that middle class consumers, when they graduate from low income to middle class, they do 2 things. They buy cars and they change their diet. And when they change their diet, they consume a lot of products that we're very competitive in producing and exporting around the world. Higher quality protein in meat products, processed and packaged products, a lot of consumer-oriented goods. We do very well in these sectors, and we think that's going to be a key driving factor moving forward. The world is richer than ever before. The world is richer than ever before. For the first time in history, half of the global population is considered middle class. Think about that. 50% of the global population is considered a middle class consumer. Now, these are customers for American agriculture. So it's very important that we pay attention to these markets. Now, since I'm not going through the slide presentation, you have to take my word for it. But if we were to list out the top 15 middle class growth markets over the next decade, 13 of the 15 are already $1 billion markets for agriculture. And it's many countries you already know: China, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Mexico, Thailand. All of these countries are already billion-dollar markets, and these are the growing middle-class markets around the world. So we think the overall global economic growth with an emphasis on middle class is a key factor to follow over the next year. The second factor, China, a fork in the road. You know, it's interesting when we think about the phase one agreement and you think about the, 57 non-tariff barriers that China committed to resolving and resolving 50 or 51, many of whom most of us thought they could have resolved at any time. It really led me to believe that when China wants to do something, it can do something. And it's really up to the decision that China wants to make over the next decade. China is undoubtedly a global leader in terms of being a customer for global products, but also a supplier of global products. And China will have to decide, will it choose a path of inclusion, one with allies around the world? Will they be part of the discussions that lead to solutions on climate change? Will they be part of discussions that increase transparency and increase predictability in trade policies around the world? Or will they choose a different path, one with isolation, one with not too many allies, one with non-transparency in terms of how their market functions? So I think China really is at a crossroads, and the decisions they make and the path they choose will have a great impact on U.S. and global ag markets. Now, the truth of the matter is there are a lot of factors beyond trade, agriculture, and economics that will drive the U.S. relationship with China. Many above, certainly my pay grade, that have to be considered. Obviously, there's all sorts of manufacturing type of considerations, security type of considerations, a number of different considerations that other folks have to consider in developing the official USDA trade policy. But from our perspective, we do think when it comes to ag trade and predictable policy, China's at a fork in the road. And if it wants to make the right decision, it will. Moving on to the third factor, commodity prices and the US dollar. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one other than to say we've all seen the high prices this year. They've relaxed in the last couple of weeks, I think. But we saw soybeans tip at over $15. We saw corn go and last at over $7 for a number of weeks. The internal domestic price for corn in other countries around the world is outrageous. So we know many industries did well in sort of the value of their commodities around the world over the last half year or so. And we're certainly seeing that in our projections for the fiscal year ag exports, a record we're projecting. But the key point I want to make here is a lot of our competitors' currencies have strengthened against the US dollar recently. And what that means is it makes commodities sold and traded in the global marketplace in the US dollar more attractive. Okay, agricultural products are sold in the US dollar. So as the dollar depreciates, it makes it more affordable. The more affordable it is, the more products we export. There is a perfect indirect correlation between the strength of the US dollar and US ag exports. So keep that in mind over the next decade. One of the things we're tracking is what the dollar will do. We think it will be steady throughout the decade, but there will certainly be various ebbs and flows as a number of these exogenous factors inform the discussion. The fourth factor, the role of trade and trade liberalization. This is probably one of my favorites. And I'll tell you why. When I started working in FS a long time ago, I worked on market access issues. The Doha Development Agenda was sort of my first, my first foray into trade negotiations and trade policy. And at that time, I never would have imagined that countries would arbitrarily retaliate by raising tariffs because they didn't like another country's policy. Never would have thought it. Thought it would have to go through this long, drawn out discussion at the WTO, this process of, if you're a developing country dealing with the World Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank, who you'd have to get approval from to raise tariffs. But just think about over the last 3-4 years what we've seen. A number of countries, many of our key markets have levied retaliatory tariffs on us. We've levied our own retaliatory tariffs on other countries. But the question is that the new norm, or will we return to some sort of rules-based, process-based mechanism to resolve trade disputes? That's a big thing to follow. And I think we'll get some hint, some semblance of what will occur as we get toward the WTO ministerial later this year. But I do think that there is a place for a functioning rules-based trading system to govern all of global trade. But without one, we've seen what the implications can be. And the implications can be very, very harmful and hurtful to American agriculture. As many countries around the world, when they get into a dispute with the United States over trade policy, it can have nothing to do with agriculture, absolutely nothing. But the first place they look to levy tariffs are on ag products. Many of your industries, many of your customers know this, and we understand and hear about that frustration on a regular basis. All right, factor number 5, as we get across the halfway point and get close to rounding out here, global production trends. The main thing I want to say here, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one, is we get a lot of phone calls. We get a lot of correspondence about, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, are you guys doing analysis on that? A couple of phone calls we've received over the last few months have been, what are you all doing about cell-cultured meat? What are you all doing about hemp? Hey, what's going on with plant-based meat products? We've got a lot of these questions. Really not sure what the global production trend will look like. But what's interesting about this, 10, 12 years ago, one commodity I would have put in this category would have been biofuels. And we've seen how robust and how export dominant they were able to become throughout the last decade. So I do think it bears watching what type of new products come online, what type of overseas global demand is generated, what type of consumer demand is generated, and what that future will be. The other thing that I like to say about the global production trends is any additional yields will have to come from technology. There's not land available that can be brought into production. There's land in Brazil. Yes, there's land in Africa. Yes, there's land in former Soviet Union territories. But all of those lands have a number of challenges to be brought into production, each of which it might be very expensive. It might be counter to other global initiatives that are taking place. So that's where we are on global production trends. Just kind of watch to see what comes online and what sort of consumer preferences might yield over the next decade. The sixth factor, ag response to climate change. This is the new one. This is the big one. And what I like to tell folks is that for the first time that I can remember, it seems the stars are aligned. When you talk about countries and governments, you talk about industry, you talk about consumers, you talk about the NGO community and the environmentalists, it seems everybody is aligned that something has got to be done on climate change. And we believe that agriculture is going to be a big part of the solution. We think many of you and your the sectors you represent already have solutions, already have practices in place that will be the model for the rest of the world to follow. But we're going to have a mighty, mighty challenge on our hands as we come up with ways to address climate change, reduce carbon, look at some of the innovation and some of the techniques available, some which we already use to mitigate carbon emissions from the ag sector. Obviously, this is going to be a whole of government, but certainly an all of USDA type approach as our sister agencies engage in more research and analysis, as we think about more conservation techniques, as we think about farmer support, what type of incentives might we have to help farmers adopt to new changes in production agriculture. And I really do think that the next 6 or 7 months will be a sprint to figuring out some of these solutions. In just a few weeks, we will embark upon the pre-Food System Summit in Rome. Later this fall, we have the actual Food System Summit in New York, followed by COP26. Then I think we have a G20 meeting thrown in somewhere, a leader summit, I believe. Then, of course, what I mentioned earlier, the WTO ministerial, and then rounding out that sort of 6 or 7 month sprint will be the Economic Forum in Switzerland. I think agriculture, climate change, sustainability will dominate those agendas as we move through the summer and into the fall and early winter. And I think we'll get a very good idea with respect to how governments and countries and industries are looking at all of these issues. So I think this is going to be a big one, and this is the new factor that we're looking at over the next decade. Last, but certainly not least, biofuels. Now, had I thought about updating this presentation 6 months ago, I don't know where biofuels would have landed. I may have tucked it into another factor, but given where we are with climate change, given that I think biofuels will be can be part of the solution in terms of a cleaner fuel, a more efficient fuel for transportation, I think that many, many countries will now think differently about some of their biofuels policies. They'll think differently about implementing mandates. They'll think differently about a lot of the marketing and promotion efforts that we've had with countries over the last decade with respect to adopting climate-friendly, environmental-friendly biofuels policies. So I think this will be a very, very close one to watch. Again, as the middle class grows, so does automobile ownership grow. And a lot of those middle class consumers will be buying vehicles that are fueled by gasoline that is blended with ethanol. So we think that is a key factor to watch. So with that, I will wrap up and just thank all of you for your time. I hope I didn't go too long. Wanted to try to keep within the time frame and keep everybody on schedule. And transition over, Chuck, if I might, to introducing our returning family member to the FS family, Vincent Fasaro. Vincent is our new senior director for the Compliance and Security Division. We call him Vinny, but I think he'll answer to both, but we call him Vinny. And his accent certainly says Vinny when you hear him talk. So you'll see why in a minute. But he joins us after a brief internship, I'll call it the AMS. He realized the error in his ways and came back to the FS family where he belongs. So we're glad to have him back in a key leadership role, a critical role that interfaces with the cooperative community on a regular basis. He was here, I think, from 2011 to 2015. So the internship lasted a little bit longer than what we've liked, but he's back now, and I'd like to introduce him and welcome Vincent Fasaro. Vincent, sir, the floor is yours.
Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. If not, someone jump in. So I'm very happy to be back with FAS and very fortunate to be joining a great team here in the Compliance and Security Division. We've got a great team of professionals on the compliance team, and it's been a pleasure working with them over the last month or so that I've been back, and I think that we have a very bright future ahead of us. I've been fortunate to have several discussions with some folks like Lorena and also some management and key personnel from global programs once I've returned. so I could learn about some of the changes that have occurred over the last 6 years since I've been here, and hear about some suggestions or concerns that we may already have, or things that were somewhat urgent to kind of look into. Those discussions have kind of led into some of the things that I'm going to cover briefly now. So to discuss fiscal year 2021 and some of the challenges that the compliance team has had. So we originally had 25 scheduled reviews for this year. And unfortunately, due to some folks that have left the division for new positions or promotions, we've had some turnover and some other circumstances, we were able to achieve 18 compliance reviews, which under the circumstances, I think is great. And we do have 7 reviews that were postponed, and we're going to look to add them to the schedule for fiscal year 22 once that gets finalized. So some of the other challenges, like I mentioned, we did have some changes with some folks leaving for new opportunities and positions. And our current staffing level, we are still currently short, I believe, 3 people on the compliance team. So the staffing level is going to continue to be a challenge for a while. Even though we might be able to fill some of those positions soon, there'll still be training and time before they're completely up to speed. Also, during this last fiscal year, as many of you probably know, we've had a lot of change in division leadership, right? Particularly in my position, the senior director position. So we've had some folks that have been acting for the most part of the better year. So we've had maybe 4 or even more people that have held this position before I came along. So that leads to a lot of different ideas about direction, or some priorities that may have changed over that last 1-year period as management changed, right? The tone is set at the top, as we know. So now hopefully we'll be able to focus on some things, and now that I'm in the position permanently, we'll be able to move forward with developing an agenda and implementing our goals and strategy for the upcoming year and beyond. So as most of you know, the division was behind on some of the timelines for compliance reports, and some of you have been waiting for compliance reviews that have been performed quite a while ago or earlier in the year. So when I came on board, I did meet with the team. The team has done a great job with trying to move things along and get things caught up. We did have a lot of delays. A lot of it was beyond our control, but a lot of the reviews have been moving. We have been able to move several to global programs for their review and distribution. And we do have several others that are now progressing through the different steps to get it finalized, which we hope will be done soon. And again, the pandemic itself, a lot of people have been met with some challenges during the pandemic, whether they be business challenges that they had to adjust to get the job done, or whether it be some personal challenges. And the compliance team, we are no different. We're human beings just like anyone else. And we did have some challenges during this time that we are all pretty much hoping to leave fiscal year 2021 in the dust, that come out of the gate fresh. And we're looking forward to fiscal year 22 and eventually getting back to normal, or some new normal. So some challenges are going to continue over the next few months. Again, staffing is going to continue to be something for us. We're going to be down a few people for a while. And we do anticipate, like Acting Administrator Whitley mentioned earlier, that we are going to remain in a maximum telework posture until sometime after October 1st, and an exact date is not clear. And there'll be a phased return after that. So in addition to whenever we do come back in fiscal year 22, whatever that phased return is going to look like, we, the compliance team, just like many others in the building, we're subject to a mandatory office move. So we do have new offices identified, but all of our equipment and all our files and belongings are in boxes. And the staff, many of them haven't even seen their new space, let alone been in here to work it up, or to make sure that IT or other things are working properly. So those are all things that we're going to have to adjust with once we do come back to work, and make sure that we do everything possible to try to mitigate those challenges. So speaking of like staffing and when we may or may not return to work, we have been performing reviews remotely during this fiscal year, which on one hand was a challenge because it was something new to us. but we are viewing it as something that could present great opportunities for moving forward. And we would like to examine ways that we could utilize that and be more efficient and maybe incorporate remote reviews in the future permanently, not 100% permanently, but some sort of hybrid combination. Eventually, once we are back to traveling, having some sort of combination of some reviews being done remotely and some being done in person. And I'll get to that a little bit more. So since joining the division in May of this year, we have made some changes and some adjustments that I think many of you will find very positive. So again, a lot of this came out of discussions with Lorena, Global Programs, and of course the staff here in CSD. So previously, the compliance team would issue reports that had findings recommended for both FAS and the cooperators together in one report combined. So as of June of this year, we did stop that practice, and we will no longer be reporting findings for FAS and findings for participants together in one document. We'll be reporting them separate. FAS will get their findings, if any, and cooperators will get their findings, if any. So in the future, they're going to be separate. Compliance specialists, as I mentioned, they are doing a fantastic job. We're trying to get the workload caught up as far as their timelines for any reviews of reports. The team has also been chipping in where they can and filling in for people or lending support in some cases to try to help some reports move along. And again, they're doing very well. Another change related to that might help mitigate some of the delays is moving forward. I put it in place that any extensions to any timelines for the reviews need to be approved by a supervisor within the division. And there needs to be a justification included for why there needs to be an extension to a particular timeline. And we're also planning on developing our first annual report at the end of this fiscal year. The annual report that we're planning will be a recap of CSD's operations throughout the year across the division, and will include some figures and information regarding compliance reviews, general information regarding findings that were noted, and there'll be some figures like dollar amounts and stuff like that, but it won't be identifying each of the cooperators or participants. It'll be done in a general fashion that does not point out anybody or call anybody out for any findings that they may have had noted. So looking ahead to the next fiscal year 22, some of the challenges that I mentioned earlier are things that we're going to be viewing fiscal year 22 as kind of like a rebuilding year, an opportunity to maybe get under the hood, tinker around a little bit, see how some things could maybe be improved upon, made it more efficient, and of course with the goal of having compliance reviews done that are efficient, high quality, and with high levels of integrity, right? Some of the pillars of doing compliance reviews. So some of the things that we've already discussed in CSD is we've discussed taking a look at some of our processes that we already have in place and seeing if we could streamline them or maybe combine some things or maybe make some adjustments or enhancements. And in some cases, it might reduce a level of effort on a particular area, and in some, it might not, but it might enhance a particular area. So like some examples are, we're taking a look at the process of doing compliance reviews remotely for market development reviews. We're examining and discussing what worked from our side of it, any lessons learned, or how we might be able to strengthen remote reviews. We're also going to be taking a look at exit notes and how the exit conference and exit notes work to make sure that we are applying both uniformly. And we do plan to take a look at the exit notes and adjust them to provide more detail about the type of potential findings that might be noted while a reviewer is either on site or performing the review remotely. So those are some of the things that we're examining. We do intend to provide more information about that and not just provide it verbally, as I understand it's been done in the recent past. And we're also taking a look at ways that we could potentially streamline the compliance review process, right? So in general, my understanding is back in January, there was a presentation that was done by my division, And it was communicated that the timeline from when a review was completed to the time that the report is issued is currently somewhere between 4 and 6 months. So we want to find ways to make sure, A, that we're staying within those 4 and 6 months whenever possible, and B, if we can reduce that timeline and shave some of the time off and maybe move it down a little bit. So we want to explore some possibilities to do that. And in order to do that efficiently, we're not going to work in a vacuum. I've already had some discussions with Lorena, and we do want to reach out to some of the cooperators that maybe have had a remote review done during this past fiscal year, or maybe already has some electronic operations or so and so. Maybe get 4 or 5 people or maybe more in 1 or 2 calls over the next month plus to maybe get some feedback and some suggestions about those areas, and also see if you might have some other suggestions for us about how we could tighten up the process and maybe streamline things and make it better. So in short, some of the things that we did is there'll be changes to the way that we report our findings. FAS and cooperative findings will now be done separately. For those of you who may liked the idea of seeing any findings or recommendations that went to FAS, you could either reach out to Global Programs or review our annual report that we're planning on submitting sometime after this fiscal year, hopefully in line with the USADEC meeting in November if it's held. And we're going to take a look at our processes to try to do some streamlining. We are already looking at revising the exit notes for fiscal year 22 reviews and making some adjustments to make them better. And we are going to be reaching out to some cooperators and Lorena to get some feedback and maybe participate in some discussions with us and share your thoughts. And of course, after we do that, we'll be circling with Global Programs and doing the same thing with those key personnel and leadership of Global Programs before finalizing anything. So with that, I'm very happy to be back and I look forward to working with you. And I'm told to turn it back to Chuck. Chuck, it's all yours.
Vincent, we have a few questions, just a few minutes here.
Sure.
One of the questions was, could you tell us who is now on the compliance team?
Sure. So we, rather than take the risk of maybe leaving out a name or so, I could submit a chart through Lorena and have that distributed to everybody. How's that?
That sounds perfectly fine.
Okay.
And then another comment was, one of the biggest changes for us was the extremely high level of professionalism of our reviewers. I felt that they were working with us and not against us. It was challenging as we had a review of 4 years of expenses, but they were incredible to work with. So kudos.
That's great to hear. Yeah, and if there's ever any feedback, especially positive feedback, we love that. But you know, I'll share my email address with Lorena in case anyone doesn't have it, and they can certainly reach out to me, and we'd love to hear things like that. But like I mentioned earlier, we've got a great team here, and I think we're going to do great things working together with the cooperators and with USADEC in the future.
So thank you very much. We look forward to working with you in the future. And with that, this was the last presentation of the conference. We thank everyone for attending, and hopefully you found it interesting. I would remind everyone that the November conference will be live, hopefully in Baltimore at the Renaissance Hotel, which is only a few blocks away from where the Hyde Regency was, where we've held the conference for a number of years. And that's the week of November the 15th. I think that's what it says. Yes, November the 15th through the 18th. So we welcome you there, and thank you very much again, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.